Thank you. Right, I think we'll start this meeting. Good morning. This is a meeting of the People and Health Scrutiny Committee of Dorset Council. My name is Jill Taylor and I chair this committee. I think before we start, I just wanted to make one quick announcement. And that is about Tony Meadows, who is leaving the council shortly. And I just wanted to thank him very publicly for the support that he has given for this committee ever since I've been part of it, and certainly a lot longer than that. He has been a huge help to me personally, and I'd just like to publicly thank him and wish him all the best for the future, wherever he ends up. And thank you. If we can move on to the committee, what I'd like to do first of all, we'll just do a bit of the housekeeping stuff, which is the normal housekeeping stuff. If you're not speaking, could you please be on mute and also have your cameras turned off? For the members of the committee and others, can you please use the chat bar wisely and just for administrative purposes? So if you'd like to speak, can you put RTS? If you have anything else that you would like to put, please put it in there, but please keep this to business only. There is a limit to how much I can read to follow. This is a very long meeting. We've had to put it over a whole day because the agenda is so large. So what I'm intending to do, we'll start the formal meeting in a minute. We'll have a comfort break at around about 11:30 because I'm aware last time we didn't have comfort breaks, which caused a few problems. We'll then finish the morning meeting sometime hopefully around about 12:30. The afternoon meeting will start promptly at 1:30, and I think we have another link to go into. It won't be on the same link. Could you just confirm that, please, Fiona?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, we're onto a different link. So if you're having problems getting in, I've got apologies for 2 members for the afternoon session at the moment. But if you're having problems getting in, could you please get in touch with Democratic Services and they'll help you. Right, so what I'd like to do is start the committee with a roll call of the members, please, just so that I know which members are out there. Robin, could I ask you to turn your camera off, please? Thank you. And your sound as well. If I go from the top, as I said, I'm Jill Taylor, I'm the chair. Is Molly Rennie there?
Yes, I am. I'm Molly Rennie. I'm vice chair of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie.
Good morning to everybody.
Good morning. Councillor Adkins, are you here this morning?
Yes, here, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dunseith?
Yes, here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gorringe?
Yes, Chair. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Ireland?
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Legg? I can see him. Okay, could you just acknowledge it, please, Councillor Legg? Can you turn your... I can see you, but you're not speaking at the moment.
I've just sent him a message.
Okay.
I think Councillor Legg's having problems with his sound at the moment.
He is. Okay, so he's here anyway. Councillor Orell? Could you confirm you're on here? Councillor Orell? I'm fairly sure he is here. I have seen him, so he must be dropping in and out a little bit at the moment.
Hello.
Hello.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Okay, great.
I had this problem last time, and on the last occasion I logged out and logged back in, and the sound came back. I've got a visual on everybody, but I've got no sound.
Okay, are you okay on a phone?
Well,
hopefully.
I'm just not sure how much battery life I've got in this.
Hardly.
I've probably got it.
If you've got a problem, you can type into the chat bar, I take it.
Yeah, I was hoping to say a few things in relation to some of the items on the agenda this morning, and it's should I try and contact IT and see what they can do about it?
Yeah, if you can. Which items did you want to speak on?
Well, most of the stuff related to the hospitals. I was hoping to listen to the presentation, and then really the stuff about the minor injuries unit and the integrated care packages.
Okay, well, the whole of the meeting's been recorded, so but otherwise, hopefully we'll see you back in a little while. Otherwise, use the
Okay.
chat bar or we'll work something out. Thank you.
Okay.
Where are we? Sorry, I've got another thing's gone to sleep.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Councillor Penfold.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, and Councillor Pipe. I think Councillor Pipe is also having IT issues this morning.
I think Councillor O'Rara is present now, Chairman.
Okay, brilliant. So we're just short at the moment of Councillor Pipe and Councillor Leggs having IT problems. Okay, that is lovely. We'll carry on. Item 2 is the minutes of the meeting of the 28th of January. I think just on those, I think we're okay to approve them unless anybody has got any comments. If I can just do a couple of updates on the minutes. We've had a meeting about performance management, and I'm still waiting for a meeting that will be taking the performance management forward offline, which is why this is no longer on our agenda. We've got 2 working groups going at the moment, or active working groups. One is for rough sleepers, which has met a couple of times, and we get in additional support from Bridget Downton's group for that one. And our other one is on the registered providers, which we have started doing some work on that. Just on that one, and for information for the committee, we have co-opted 2 additional members in. So we now have Councillor Took and Councillor Gibson are members of that working group. This is something that I intend to adopt generally for this committee, in that when we set up working groups, if there are other members of the wider membership of councillors who wish to take part in some of these working groups, I would welcome them, because that then gives us a really good spread across the council and it helps resilience. Thank you. Could I have, if the minutes are okay, could I have a proposer for the minutes, please?
I'll propose them.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder?
I'll second, Councillor Taylor.
Okay, that's Councillor Ireland has second. So if anybody disagrees with the minutes, can you just put something in the chat bar now? That's very quiet. Okay, so the minutes are approved and I will sign them as appropriate. Declarations of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest this morning? There's silence out there, so I assume nobody has, but if anybody suddenly realises that they needed to declare something, please feel free to say so during the meeting. Public participation. We have no public participation, rather surprisingly this morning. I had expected a few questions coming in from members of the public, but it's been very quiet at the moment, which makes me wonder why. I always like public participation. I like the public coming into our meetings. And I think we need at some time to look at why they're not coming in and why they're not talking to us, because I really like people talking to us. We've also got no questions from members. But that is fine, because members do an awful lot of work in the background and get their own questions answered that way. So moving swiftly on, we're on to item 6 already. Now I have seen Steve Killen on the call somewhere. Steve, are you there?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you very much for coming this morning. And you're going to give us a presentation on New Hospitals Programme and what it means for Dorset. And this should be really interesting. I've heard good things about your presentation that you gave to BCP a few weeks ago. They were really enthused by it. Good. So I hope this committee is the same. We are a scrutiny committee, so although we haven't got any papers for this, I would like some debate on this afterwards. I think there will be debate and look at it from a scrutiny standpoint. Thank you. If I can hand over to Steve, that would be absolutely great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few people on the call with me. So I've got Nick Johnson, who'll be presenting the second half of the slides. So I'll do about 6 slides, and then Nick Johnson, who will introduce himself in a minute. Nick, if you maybe turn your camera on just to introduce yourself in a second. But also on the call for any questions, we've got Ben Print, who's the programme manager from Dorset County, and then we've got the estates lead and the programme lead for this from Dorset Healthcare, which is Chris Lawrence, and Jonathan Kempton are on for this item as well. But just to introduce myself, and then I'll hand over to Nick. I'm Steve Killen. I'm the Transformation Director at University Hospitals Dorset, but for this role I'm wearing the hat of being the Director in charge of the New Hospitals Programme, working on behalf of the entire health system. Nick?
Yeah, morning all. My name's Nick Johnson. I'm Deputy Chief Executive and Director of Strategy and Transformation at Dorset County Hospital, and I'm the SRO for the programme for Dorset County Hospital and part of the system programme board.
So, Chair, if it's okay, would you mind if I screen share? We've got about 10 slides. I'll do about 5 or 6. Nick's got about 4 or 5. It should take us about 10 to 12 minutes to get through the presentation, and then happy to then take as much time as you want for questions and debate.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much, Steve.
Okay. So I can't see any hands, so please someone prompt me, because you know how these things are. But
could I just ask, do you want to take questions as we go through it, or would you rather wait until the end?
To be honest, Chair, if you interrupt me, I'm happy to take questions as we go. If they're probably questions of anything that's kind of just pertinent to the slides, just in terms of clarifications, might be good on the way through, but maybe hold all other questions for a fuller debate at the end. I can always go back to the slides if we need to go back and bring them up again.
Okay, that's brilliant. And I know I'm going to get asked this in the chat bar. Could I have a copy of the slides, please, to distribute? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. I'll send the PDFs across to Fiona straight away.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I say, we've got myself, Steve, Ben, and then Chris and Jonathan are also on the call. So really, Chair, this is it's a great news story, really. I'm going to just talk you through a reminder of the CSR and where we've come from, but it's a good news story for Dorset because it's an opportunity for significant extra investment into the Dorset system. It reaffirms the great story that we've had around the Dorset narrative, around the changes that we've made, but it also sets us up well because of the fact that we are highly regarded in the national landscape in terms of being a mature integrated care system. We're being put forward and we're getting opportunities like this. So this is an opportunity that will bring a minimum of 350 million, possibly up to 500 million of additional capital across our Dorset system, across 12 community sites, and that's what we're going to talk you through today. This is the start of the opportunity, and it's an opportunity that will run right through this period, this government and into the second government, so through to 2030, really. If I go on to the slides then. So just a refresh of our CSR journey. So this was about, as a reminder, this was about the clinical services review, which we had. The image in the top left was the clinical services review, and then we had the mental health consultation as well, which was the acute mental health care pathway consultation. We're all about improving pathways, putting care closer to home, improving access, and that had had extensive scrutiny. We know it had been through the joint HOSC with yourselves and BCP in previous guises. It's been out for consultation, judicial review, independent review panel and Secretary of State. So we know that it's got a lot of a review in terms of the national level. We also know that we've got a credible system. As I said, the Dorset system is very credible both locally and nationally. And we were in the top 10 ICSs in the country. So we were one of the Wave 1 integrated care systems to get funding, which was positive. And this really, the breadth of the CSR was about prevention, community, acute services, and putting real change in the community. Now, what it didn't have in that Wave 1 funding, we got £250 million, and I'm happy to talk about that as part of the questions if we want to. And that's been new pathology, that's been improvements in across the sites. But this was about investments in the community hubs, and an opportunity to make some of those changes. So the point of the clinical services review is that there was still further opportunity for community offers to be improved. So what is the health infrastructure programme, or as it's being rebadged now, the new hospital programme? Well, in 2019, the government strategy was to improve health infrastructure. And that included a plan for 40 new hospitals, and that was in the government Conservative manifesto at that point in time. Dorset had 12 of those 40 hospitals in that original manifesto. There's been a reprioritisation since, as things have changed, as priorities have changed. COVID has partly affected that. And so they've kept the health infrastructure programme, which was the original 40, but brought a few additional in. I think it's now expanded to about 48 or 50 hospitals. And they've prioritised a number that will go early, and 5 of our 12 have been prioritised. So again, this is a good news story for us because it's 5 of our 12 hospitals in the Dorset system have been prioritised to get early investment. And that brings about £370 million for the 5, and I'll come on to those in a minute, or 500 million across all 12 in the longer term. What are those schemes? Well, they are literally across the entire county. So these were the schemes that were sitting across the county. So everything from Christchurch across to Dorset County, east to west, from Shaftesbury and Sherborne down to Weymouth and Portland, in terms of the slides that we cover. And it was an ambitious programme. It covers all aspects of integrated health and social care. But I've done a slide specifically drawing out the Dorset Council one. So if I just move on, and again, these slides are available. So this is specific to Dorset Council. So the investments are £5 million investment in Wimborne, improvements in the hub at Wimborne, a new community hub at Shaftesbury, up to £20 million there. Sherborne, reconfiguration of the site and releasing some land for housing, for key worker housing and other things. So that's about an £18 million investment. Forston, so our mental health facility, removing a lot of the backlog maintenance, and you can see on the side some of the images from some of our mental health facilities of what we're going from and what we're aspiring to go to. And that's a £25 million investment in Forston. Dorset County Hospital, significant removal of backlog, ICS, the reconfiguration that's been planned as part of the integrated care system and expanding ED and critical care to about £63 million. And then Weymouth and Portland, a further £30 million, again, as part of the changes that were planned for the community hub there, and also removal of some of the backlog and maintenance there. So there's some of the schemes that we are going to focus on. Final one from me is just to give a sense of the timeline for people to understand. Then I'm going to just hand over to Nick for 5 minutes. So this paints a story that's a 15-year journey, starting from 2014 when we started both the clinical services review and the mental health care pathway review, right through to all of the design work and getting the proposals agreed, right through to January 21, where we have, and Nick's overseen this as our SRO for this programme, has overseen this investment of the strategic outline case, which has opened up this opportunity. We've then got some further business cases we need to go through, with investment opening up across all of our sites, including Dorset County, right through to 26 to 29. So it's a kind of 15-year plan that's already halfway in the making, but the legacy is what we've built on so far. I'm going to hand over to Nick for a moment about what's a community hub.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So I'm just going to take you through a few slides very briefly. The first one is just to talk about community hubs. So mainly these are going to be delivered by Dorset Healthcare, who are our community and mental health provider within Dorset, but the Mid Dorset hub will go on to the Dorset County Hospital site, and that's part of the wider DCH programme to deliver the new emergency department and the intensive care unit, which ensures that Dorset County Hospital can deliver emergency and planned services for the people and populations of Dorset now and into the future. So it's a bit of a bigger scheme than just a community hub on the DCH site. But just to talk about the community hub specifically, there isn't a sort of a prescribed model for what the community hubs look like. There's a recognition of need for flexibility to meet local needs. And really, I think what we're looking to do is think about what's right for the patients, what's right for the population, what's right for providers, and what's right for the place within which those community hubs are based. The slide gives us sort of a bit of a sense as to the types of services that could be based within the community hubs. We already have some existing hubs which deliver these types of services, but the new hospitals programme gives us an opportunity to really think about that and potentially expand what the hubs are doing, or certainly reconfigure them. I think ultimately, for me, the purpose of the hubs is, whatever they look like, the hubs are seeking to bring teams together across the health and care system and beyond into the voluntary sector as well, to really think about how we keep people healthy and keep people as close to home as possible. And for me, really thinking about how we best meet the needs of our places. So that was what I was going to say on the community hubs in general. I'm sure we can pick up on any specific questions around individual hubs, and my Dorset Healthcare colleagues can support that. Just in terms of the programme setup, Steve's already alluded to this, so I won't spend too much time on it. I think there's just a sort of a couple of points to make. We've got a system-wide programme set up to ensure that we are planning this across the NHS and across the wider health and care system, rather than doing it as individual organisations. So making sure we get the real benefit of economies of scale and sharing of knowledge, etc. Within the programme, we report up into the system leadership team, which has got local authority representatives on it. So there's LA input as we go through this process as well. So I think that's really sort of an important point to make. Steve, do you just want to move me on again? Thank you. So just a sort of a few points to make on the key drivers in the new hospital programme. These are some of the key things that are being set at a national level for us to think about and look at as we're developing and designing our plans. They're set nationally, but I think they are the right things to focus on. They make sense to look at as part of a major building programme. From a national perspective, the Department of Health and Social Care and NHS England and Improvement have got to think about how they spend billions of pounds and manage a market across the country, and they're asking all of the hospitals to think about some really key things. They're asking us to think about modern methods of construction. For me, that pretty much boils down to, how do you develop repeatable designs for various different services, and how do you do as much off-site as possible to really sort of condense delivery timescales as well. So that's one of the key things they're asking us to look at. They're also asking us to look at whether we can achieve net zero carbon. The definition of that is sort of still being developed, but again, the aim, I think, is laudable and is absolutely the right one. Obviously links in with the council's climate emergency declaration, and it links in closely, certainly from a DCH perspective, with our social value pledges and commitments to really minimise our carbon footprint as well. So that's another key thing. The final thing they're asking us to really think about, and I think this is something that's come to the fore through COVID and influences some of the thinking, I think, as we go forward on the community hubs, is the digital blueprint. So actually, how are we going to better use digital? So this isn't simply a how do we build big buildings program. This is actually how do we bring people together? How do we bring services together? How do we improve pathways and transform the way that we deliver care, as Steve said at the start? And digital provides us with a huge opportunity to do that. So we're being asked to look at what the digital offer is within this overarching program. And as I said, I think COVID has demonstrated that we can do an awful lot with digital. And we perhaps wouldn't have thought about that in COVID. So that's the other thing we're really looking to build into the program as we develop. Final slide, Steve. So just very briefly on the timetable, we submitted our strategic outline case to NHS E&I, which is now being sort of considered by them and by the Department of Health and Social Care and the national programme at the end of January. I think we were one of the first programmes to submit, which I think is really positive. I think the reality is that while the government has committed to 40 new hospitals, they haven't quite committed the level of funding that you need to build 40, I think, or as Steve said, 50, once they've thrown in a few other schemes as well. They haven't quite committed the funding for that. So we are in a competition. We're in a race to try and get our business cases in as quickly as we can, and really importantly to demonstrate the deliverability of our schemes as well, to really demonstrate that we can what we're saying we're going to deliver, and that's why certainly from a Dorset County Hospital perspective we were so delighted to get the support of the council and the planning committee last year for our multi-storey car park, because that unlocks the site and allows us to deliver the new emergency department and intensive care unit, and if we hadn't have got that, we would really struggle to demonstrate some of the deliverability around the scheme that we've got. So we're really very conscious that we're in a national competition, and also we need to think about the prioritisation of these schemes at a county level as well, so across Dorset. And the reality is we're going to have to programme these schemes in, so we're going to have to think about that as we go through the next few years as well. So that was all I was going to say on that slide. I think the timescale is tight. We want to try and do as much as we can as quickly as we can, but we want to do it with all of our key stakeholders and partners, and do it in a measured way as well. So we're trying to find the right balance between those two things, and we are happy to take any questions to help inform how we take this forward.
Thank you very much. That was a really, really interesting presentation. I've got a few people asking to speak. What I'm intending to do is take the non-committee members first, because I've got a couple of those asking questions. So if any of the non-committee members out there, the other ones who are out there, would like to ask questions, please put RTS in the chat bar. In the meantime, can I go to Councillor Kimber first for a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. I have to say that was absolutely excellent. If I can be local, I represent Portland, and we have many issues as regards to travelling, especially when it's very, very, very rough. I really wanted to know around this community hub. What will it be like for Portland, and how will people know the services are getting so much better? Thank you.
Do you want?
Yeah, good. Sorry.
Chair, are you happy for us to just jump in?
Yeah, please do. Just jump in and answer.
So I can bring the slide up, Councillor Kimber, about what exactly is going on in Portland, and while I'm jumping to it, I'm happy. I might ask Chris Lawrence, actually, who's also on the call, to maybe join me, or Jonathan might come in and just talk about what's going on in Portland and Weymouth. So I know that it was about, there's quite a lot of, you've already got an existing hospital there, I think. Yes. I think there's quite a lot of backlog issues going on that site. So a lot of the challenge, I think it was up to £30 million investment going on there, was about the removal of backlog. But I can see Chris has come on. Chris, do you want to come in? You'll have more of an idea on this to be able to talk about the detail for me, please.
Yeah. So, Councillor Kimber, what our proposal is doesn't really deviate from what we said within the original CSR. A lot of the focus is on the consolidation of a new hospital in Weymouth, and actually the removal of the two, or the disposal for housing of the two current sites that we've got within Weymouth. So I guess the honest answer is that it's probably Weymouth biased and not necessarily that focused on Portland in terms of that. I do know, though, from an historic basis that we have committed to having something within Portland as well. I believe that our previous lead had stated that on the public record, and I know that there is another scheme that is being developed in and around Portland, which is actually more focused on primary care networks, but we should be linked in with that as well. So there is some focus on developing, but actually it's not part of this HIP2 scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If I can bring in Councillor Took, please.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I have a very brief question, I think. Well, two, to be honest. The first is, I live on the borderlands, so I'm in East Dorset, along with many thousands of others. We tend to get our healthcare through Hampshire, and I'm sure others will do it through Wiltshire. Indeed, if I go to hospital, I would go to Salisbury, Odstock Hospital. So is there any cross-border working involved here? Are there liaisons with Hampshire, Wiltshire? And I guess on the other side of the county, we could be looking at links with Devon and Somerset. And my other question is, can you differentiate the hubs and new hospitals? Because I'm a little confused about what you actually mean by a new hospital. Thank you.
Chair, if I take that second question, and then maybe I'll ask Nick to jump in and help me with the conversation around cross-border. So new hospital programmes, Councillor, is an excellent question. I think where we've got to, speaking quite candidly about it, it's an opportunity for a hospital or a new part of a hospital to be opened and a ribbon cutting opportunity, but actually that's an investment in our area. So in some cases it can be quite small. I think we're testing the model slightly. The Dorset system is quite unusual in that of all of the 40 schemes, we're the only scheme that is being done across a number of providers. So we're in as an ICS. All others are single trusts applying pretty much for one building. And what we're saying is we can develop a number of areas, and it could be part of the Dorset County site, it could be part of the Bournemouth site, it could be part of the Forston site, maybe a wing of a building. So it really, the definition is quite loose, but it is an opportunity for a new part of a hospital to be opened up. So that's probably the answer to your second question. Answer to your first question, I'll jump to Nick. I know we do have some cross-border, but Nick, do you want to just come in?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things on that sort of cross-border working. I think the first thing is that obviously is integrated care systems, we consistently and constantly talk to each other about our services and the flows of people across those various different borders. So we do that on a regular basis, and this is part of those conversations. I think the other thing probably to say is that there aren't any hospitals immediately on our borders who are within this programme. Plymouth in Devon is one, but it's not sort of the direct adjacent hospital for Dorset County Hospital, for example. So we don't have any similar programmes like that happening. The interesting one, certainly from a DCH perspective, is that Yeovil have announced their intention to sort of look at the option to merge with Taunton Hospital. So there might be some reconfiguration of services within Yeovil. So that might have an impact on the flows of patients into Dorset County Hospital. And as we go through our business case process, we will consider the potential impact of that. So we'll try to consider those patient flows and that potential shift in activity, and all still to be determined. So that's not me announcing anything specifically, but it's just an example of the work that we're doing to understand how patients on the various different borders are taken into account. And the other obvious one as well is sort of the internal Dorset County border, where we've got patients in sort of the Purbeck Swanage area who may choose to go either east or west, and actually how do we model some of the flows there, and obviously as a system we're talking really closely around how that works.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got one more non-committee member, who's John Andrews, and then I want to go to the portfolio holder. So if I can go to Councillor Andrews first, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Appreciate that. John Andrews, I'm the Sherborne member on the east side of Sherborne. I'm really interested in reconfigure the Yetman and the land for housing. Don't know where that's going to be. What kind of consultation has taken place with the healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, etc., because buy-in is that important, and also local leadership people like such as the town council and the Dorset councillors. And I'm particularly concerned about the Yetman Hospital. I'm also concerned about the locality of Yeovil, because at the moment, as you know, our MRU is closed, which will come up later, which is an abominable position we're in. So if services are taken away from Yeovil, our nearest place is Dorchester, which is ridiculous because it shouldn't be a county health service, it should be a national health service. So I'm really concerned about that. So there's 3 questions there. I'm sorry to land you with 3 questions, but I am concerned. But as far as the community hubs goes, have you taken that into consideration with the local plan that's coming through? Because there's a big proposal in Sherborne on the local plan, which I hope will encompass some kind of community hub, because an integrated community hub which encompasses GPs and all the services you've said would be absolutely brilliant in this northwestern end of the county, where we seem to lack facilities for some reason. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Chair, Councillor Andrews, could I just ask you said 3 questions. Could you just clarify what the 3 questions were, if you don't mind then, please?
Well, the Yetman, you said, housing at the Yetman, or some kind of housing. I really don't know where you're going to put that, because it's right in the middle of the conservation area as well. Okay. The second one was what kind of consultation has taken place, because I don't think there's anything come through the local Sherborne Town Council, which I'm chairman of at the moment. The Yeovil situation, because as you know, we're 4 miles away from the boundary here in both directions, north and west, and our nearest A&E and our nearest hospital is Yeovil Hospital, instead of driving kind of like 21 miles to Dorchester Hospital, carbon footprint taken into consideration. There aren't no bus routes to Dorchester really that you can talk about. The last one was the local plan. Have you integrated some of your thinking with the planning department on the local plan? Because it doesn't make sense to do something now and then a local plan comes into operation in 5-10 years time, and you've spent loads of money doing stuff, when actually it could have been incorporated on a local plan, and you could have built a site for a community hub, for etc. And this is not just Sherborne, this is everywhere, that could be encompassed into that. So I just wonder how much consultation you've had with the planning department on the local plan. Okay, thank you. Councillor Andrews, I'm going to hand that to Chris and Jonathan. So Chris, do you want to start and then maybe bring Jonathan where you need to?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. So if I just answer the first one, maybe there was a, I'm not quite sure, because I'd need to refer back to the slides, but ultimately what our current proposal is for the Yetman Hospital is that it's actually a development of the Yetman site ultimately, and so consequently it is about just that, including primary care within there, including community services, etc. And our preferred way forward within our strategic outline cases to try and incorporate third sector partners within that as well. So that very much keeps us on the site, and that is our intention. And I think that's pretty much aligned with what the outcome of the CSR was. In terms of consultation, this scheme is one that we have pretty much worked up the strategic outline case, which in essence just regurgitates what the CSR said and states that we want to deliver what the CSR states. And therefore, in terms of consultation, we haven't really needed to go back to clarify what the consultation was, because we consider that the CSR gives us that. That said, we know that we need to design for the future, and we need to take into account what the future requirements are of the populations, etc. And so as we go into outline business case and our final business case, we will then get into a lot more detail in terms of what future demand is like, what other differing services are required around the county and the adjoining counties. So actually we ensure that the services are correct and fit for the future as we go forward. And I guess to an extent that answers your third question, which is about how do we integrate with Yeovil. We do that once we get clearer in terms of what it's like going forward. To answer the question on local plan, we haven't engaged with anything around the local plan around Yeoman Hospital, actually, because we don't think there's that much need to around there. However, we have on other locations, specifically our Forston site, actually.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you for those answers. But it's still concerning that we're up there in 12 to 2,000 houses around the outskirts of Sherborne. There's going to be a need for healthcare. Certainly, one of these hubs would be absolutely brilliant. But I'm still concerned about, because I don't think the question on the land for housing around the Yetman was answered. I still have big concerns, but I love the idea of a community hub. So, but a 15-year plan is such a long plan. Things change in 15 years, and a plan is a plan, and you have the changes. When you're building your house, you have to put a bigger door in, plans change. So I think there needs to be some kind of flexibility in what we're doing and how we're doing it. And of course, COVID has changed the whole world at the moment, and we're looking at things in a different perspective. So thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you. Lord, Councillor Miller, just checking you're out there. You wanted to speak. When did you want to speak? Is now appropriate?
Now would be great, Chair, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Carry on.
Fantastic. Thank you. So yeah, Councillor Laura Miller, Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health. Thank you for that presentation. I always find it really interesting, and certainly supportive of the hub model as well. I just wanted to understand really. My colleague Councillor Andrews has covered a couple of bits that I wanted to cover, and obviously different solutions and different provisions will look different for different areas. That's sort of the whole point, isn't it? And so what I would like to understand is, in our social care transformation, we have been changed by COVID, and we've worked so closely with the community and with the community sectors. And I would, with our transformation programme in adults, we actually now have a stakeholder board made up of those partners that we've been working with, so that we can understand the need. So it's not just sort of service focused. We're not just plonking services down in areas based on population. We're actually understanding what the need is. So I appreciate that, extensive consultation has happened. My goodness, has it happened? I know that you've been through the ringer, and rightly so. It's really important. But I would like to understand really where the kind of community bit fits in, and how you're understanding that in different locations. Oh,
Nick, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I'd say I think it's a really good question, and the point about actually we've done the consultation. The CSR was there a number of years ago, and as it was mentioned, things change. Certainly from a DPH perspective, we looking at what the community hub for Mid Dorset looks like, we have set up a process where we've got all of the various different stakeholders and partners around the table. We're not going into it with it needs to look like this and it needs to be these services. We're going into it saying, well, what is the need, and what best meets the needs of the people, the population, and the place that we're serving, and that's the approach that we're taking. And the conversations we've been having with our council colleagues have been quite open. Actually, what has COVID changed? What does digital mean? Council colleagues need to think about alignment with their housing services and with other types of services as well. So we're certainly not going into it thinking, health has got this view and therefore it needs to look like this. We're looking at it from what does the people of the place and the population need, and that's how we're trying to define up the sort of the service model for the Mid Dorset hub. And if it transpires that we need to do something different, that's fine, and that's what we'll do. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I suppose I was just looking for that reassurance that it was going to be kind of more creative than perhaps people would expect, or perhaps we would be used to, because I certainly think that that's the space that we've all collectively moved into over the last year. So I'm really pleased to hear that, and thank you, Chair.
Could I ask Tony Meadows to come in on this point as well, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, really just to follow up on Nick's point, and just to sort of reinforce that sort of reassurance point. We've had conversations. I mean, again, when we talk about hubs, if we really think about it, that word's been overused. What does it really mean? And I think the key thing, as Nick's just mentioned, is that from COVID, we have learned how communities can work differently. We've worked how we can work differently, and all of that learning really needs to play a part in this. So I think that what we're really saying from a council point of view is we're at the table. We want to work on this with our health partners. And the key point is what we want to really be advocating is it's grown from the community upwards, that this is really the direction of travel, and we need to be taking that learning, taking those groups that we've been working with and ensuring that their voice is at the table to actually develop this to a meaningful hub, or whatever you want to call it, that means something to that community. So it's really just reassurance that we've had those conversations, we've stated sort of where we're at, and I think we're all on the same page in terms of how we're going to move together. So it's really just reinforcing that point from a Dorset Council perspective. And also, I hadn't said anything for a while, so I thought I'd jump in.
No, thank you very much, Tony.
Not a problem.
Okay, we're going to move over onto the committee. Can I just ask a question while we are on hubs? I noticed on your map, it was just about the distribution of hubs across Dorset. And I noticed there wasn't anything planned for the Purbeck area and the Swanage area. Is that right, or did I just miss something on that?
So again, Jonathan or Chris will come in on this, but we are investing in that area. It's just not part of the new hospital programme, so it's part of Dorset Healthcare's investment plan to continue to do that. But that was already in train and was already had kind of momentum anyway. Chris, I can see you've got your hand up. I don't mind whether you or Jonathan jump in on this one.
So we addressed that through a scheme called the Building Better Lives scheme through with our partners in the council, actually. So in the Purbeck location. So that is the scheme that we currently work on there. It's just not funded by this HIP2 element. That's why it's not incorporated.
Okay, thank you. Can I go to Councillor Legg, please?
Thank you very much, Jill. If I may, can I return to the Sherborne-Yetman proposals, because I represent the villages around the town, and like John, I'm one of the rarities in that I was actually born in the town. So I've seen the Yetman develop over the decades. And one thing that I was quite surprised to see the slide, which had reconfigure and reutilize part of the site for housing, because I wasn't aware of any proposals coming forward, and it seems to me that this is all being developed in something of a vacuum. I mean, it may not be a vacuum from your point of view. I guess you've been fully engaged on it, but at least from the community point of view. And one of the things that John and I and Matt Hall have been concerned about since the inception of the new Dorset Authority is the lack of engagement really between the health providers and those who are responsible for our hospital in the town, and the way in which some of the outpatient departments were removed from the Yetman as a result of decisions being made in Yeovil. And of course, obviously, that all dovetails into the points that were made about the possibility of Yeovil linking directly with the hospital in Taunton, and what the consequence of that will be on the northwest frontier. If you're going to spend £18 million on a site, and one of the slides which you showed suggested that you're looking at modular methods of construction and actually having environmentally sensitive developments, does it actually make sense to spend £18 million on some of a site which is over 150 years old? You know, at what point does pouring more money into a site, and as I will walk past probably in an hour or so when I get out of this meeting and walk past the Yetman, which is only about 250 yards from where I'm talking to you, there's still construction going on the roof of what you might call the new unit. Over the years, the League of Friends have actually, and it wouldn't be an understatement to say, have actually given millions of pounds to help in capital works on the Yetman, most of which have gone in, and then within about 5 or 6 years, they've all been ripped out. So I'm just wondering about the economics of this and what makes sense. You know, John talked about a community hub, and you talk in your slides about releasing land for housing development. Wouldn't it be sensible perhaps to say, is this the site that we want to go on investing in? Would it be cheaper, better provision, better quality of care, more environmentally sensitive to build a brand new hospital on a site identified in the local plan? I mean, I'm just throwing that into the mix. It's probably a wild idea, but there is going to come a point at which somebody's going to say, I tell you what, this site is too old, too cramped, too difficult, and it's much cheaper and much better for healthcare to build a brand new one somewhere else.
Thank you, Councillor Legg. I'm going to pass that straight to Chris and ask Chris to comment, who may well draw Johnson in between them.
Councillor Legg, I completely agree with what it is that you're saying in terms of the opportunities that should be taken from this perspective. I guess that as a trust, we operate within the domain of restricted resources, and so consequently we have to make some decisions around where it is that we put the restricted investment that we get ultimately. That's not to say though that during the outline business case there isn't an opportunity for us to be able to look at alternative sites and put that into the mix around the business case to say, well, does this stack up? And actually the rigor that we are required to put into our business cases through the Department of Health's business case process really does make sure that we do those types of things, and happy to get involved with you to look at different opportunities that you might think there are ultimately around meeting up in the future and talking them through. Just to go back to my previous as well, I'm not sure that we do have any housing provision on that site. It's not something that, I think that's just a mistake on a previous slide. So I think the focus really on the Yetman Hospital is about the redevelopment ultimately.
Can I just throw one little comment into that? As part of the local plan process, the town council were approached for a presentation by the Digby Estate, who actually own all of the land that's going to be earmarked for a major development over the next 15 to 20 years. Might be a good idea to say to them, because they've been quite generous over the last century or so, why don't you give us a site for a hospital?
Point noted, Chair.
I think that is lovely. Well done, Chris, for taking that question, because that was a really, really tough one. Sorry, I've got Jonathan wanting to come in, probably on the same subject, I hope.
Yes, Thank you, Councillor. To give you some reassurance, just following on from what Chris said, I lived in Sherborne, so I do share some of your concern, and that would be a fantastic solution, knowing that the Digby land as well. That would be wonderful. A great idea. Just so to get an idea of the process that we go through and why these things are on the slide is that we've submitted a strategic outline case, and what that does is that delineates an investment requirement. So we've found an investment need, and as you correctly highlighted, the hospital's perhaps quite old. So we highlight that investment need, and then what we show the organisation, the government, is that we've appraised some options, and some of those options may be, say, for example, key worker housing, which we know is in shortage. And that's really broadly speaking, what the strategic outline case does. Once we get some further funding to develop that, then we go into the outline business case, and that's when we start forming working groups and we get heavily engaged with the communities to discuss what the options are and really drive through the sort of preferred way forward and whatever that may look like. So that process, we rather hope will start fairly soon. So that might give you a bit more comfort as to the levels of engagement. I hope that helps.
Perhaps could I come in a bit here, Jill?
Please do.
I can understand exactly what you're saying, Jonathan, but the minute you put all this your options into these things, in Dorchester, when you came and spoke to us all in Dorchester about the options, and people talked about shopping, key worker housing and all these things, that is when the community goes, oh, what are they talking about here? I thought they were going to deliver healthcare to us. And it's this understanding that you've got to fund the development, but maybe what you're doing I've also lived in Sherborne and also have used that hospital, and and see that housing down that bottom end opposite the pub there that's already there, and I thought, where are they going to put some more housing when what they need is probably something else altogether? And I think this is the care that's needed when something goes out publicly beforehand, when really we haven't got shops on the site in Dorchester that people got all very worried about. And I think that it's this care needed when you're explaining this to councillors as well as the public, because we start to get worried unnecessarily. And we're all up and fighting a corner,
You wanted to come back, Steve?
Yeah, so Chair, just I think to answer yours and Molly's point, really, I think one of the things that the NHS under Nick and the other execs guidance is trying to be more commercially smart, I think, in how we use the assets that we have. We have very few assets. We're very fortunate in Dorset that when the land got carved up, we retained our hospitals. In many areas of the country, they were given to central NHS services, and that was lost. So we have an opportunity, and it's about using that wisely. And I think, to Councillor Rennie's point, I think we need to kind of talk to you, but hopefully what we're trying to convey is that we're looking at opportunities that both give us a financial return that allows us to invest in healthcare, but in a smart way that is socially responsible. So if that is key worker housing, or it's some retirement villages and shared villages that are close to a community hub setting that we can make a return on, then that allows us to set ourselves up in Dorset for the future. So, but your point is well made. I think it's about have the ideas and be creative, but engage and talk and let you know, without just being randomly picking shopping centres as a kind of as an idea. But hopefully that's the way forward, Nick.
So yeah, I'm like, just to add in, and as the architect of some of those early proposals, Councillor Rennie, I should probably just say, in my mind, to build on Steve's point, we do have to think creatively about how we fund some of our developments and those sorts of things. But actually, for me, that was and I would say this, wouldn't I? That was a good example of how actually we sort of had an idea, and then we sort of went to try and consult and engage with our key partners and our key stakeholders we got a sense actually that's probably not where people want to be, and we changed them. So I'm seeing this sort of process, our attendance today as part of that as well, and I'm sure we've all taken some good things already, and we'll go away and have a think about some of the things we've been looking at. And the other thing, just to sort of say on housing, certainly from a health perspective, there's a huge issue with our workforce. One of the things that we need to do from an NHS perspective, but also more widely, I think, across social care is attract key workers in to try and continue to deliver the high quality care that we do. Housing is a big issue. So if we can try and help solve some of those issues, or at least contribute to trying to solve some of those issues by developing key worker housing, etc., then I think we're pretty committed to doing that as well. But it's finding the right balance.
Thank you. I think from me, I think it would be a request for you to talk to the parish councils more. I mean, I'm in Weymouth in the middle of the storm over the barriers on the Esplanade, on the harbour, and it's all about communication. And I noted that somebody said something that you'd already consulted on this, so you didn't necessarily need to talk to the public. I think you do need to keep on talking to the public. You need to get your plans out there so that the public have an understanding of what you're doing. This is the problem that we get, as Molly said, when we don't understand, when councillors don't understand and the public haven't got it. That is when there starts being problems. It's a case of taking the public along with you. If I can go to the next question now, which was Councillor Orell, please.
Yeah, if I can start with a quizzical observation, and then I'll move on to my questions. If one had a car and failed to maintain it for 10 years, just ran it into the ground and then replaced the clutch and the engine, would it be a new car? I'll leave you to ponder that, but I do welcome the investment in 5 so-called new hospitals, which are welcome. Right, now my question. I'm speaking from Weymouth and Portland. We do welcome the community, integrated care sites do work very well, and I acknowledge that. They are a great innovation. From the point of my town, though, at the beginning of 10 years ago, we had 4 hospitals with beds. At the end of this period, we will have 1. So it feels to my population like we are losing hospitals, though I acknowledge the investment in the new ones and the community hubs. In past selling off of hospital land, which we saw at the Blackdown site, and particularly around Weymouth Hospital, which used to be the main hospital for West Dorset, we lost enormous amounts of car parks and buildings up Dorchester Road, but all the money from that left Weymouth and Portland. We didn't see anything south of the Ridgeway to benefit the Weymouth and Portland population. So I'm particularly keen on this housing business. I'm partly reassured. You're talking about financial returns for healthcare. So that 25 million is 25 million that's taken out of Weymouth and Portland, I take it, rather than 25 million investment. So just clarify that. What does the 25 million mean related to housing? And some of the comments were that we're pretty committed to social or healthcare housing and getting the right balance, the words I've heard recently. Can I tie down a bit more firmly on that one? If we're going to lose public land that was for the NHS, for the people of Weymouth and Portland, can we be a bit more committed to public sector housing for nurses, police and teachers? And I don't want, because what I've seen before is with lots of private developments, we get a very minimal commitment, and then it's whittled down because it becomes not commercially viable, and we see it go down and down and down. So I'd like to see that the NHS being not doing that, actually exceeding its bare minimum requirements. Really, I'd like 100% public sector housing out of this site, because this is a public site. So that is my first question. Can we be a bit more bold on making this housing in Weymouth and Portland and other areas for public sector workers entirely, because we need it. Shall I stop at that one? I'll save my second question.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Orrell. So just to avoid any confusion with what was on the slides, the number at the end was the investment that is going into each site. So that's the investment going in. It's not the value that is being released by land. It's just the way that the sentence has appeared. So it should be in a separate line. So it's reconfigure, release of land for housing, and there is an £80 million investment coming into that, as well as any other money that comes in from the land sale that will also contribute to that. So that's probably not come through very clearly in the slides, but when you see a number against it, that is the value that we are asking the national team for, and that they have notionally penciled in for us as part of the strategic outline case. As Nick said earlier on, it is a bidding process, so we are best foot forward, and part of this is being on the front foot and being as agile and as quick as we can in our responses to get the money in. I think Chris, I'll come to you if you want about Weymouth and Portland and how we'll use the land there. And then if we need to, Councillor, I can kind of come back to the key worker, the general comments on key worker housing and investment, and how the NHS in Dorset is looking to kind of protect its assets and open up those opportunities. But Chris, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. As Jonathan alluded to earlier on, we are still at that strategic outline case, which pretty much in the process enables us to bid for the money to do it. And actually then as we build up the scheme, i.e. the outline business case, then that is the point at which we need to be able to articulate exactly what it is that we want to do with that scheme. I can't make commitments that will be scrutinised by the likes of Nick in the committee and the like around this individual site, but actually it is our intention to ensure that any land that we release is for key worker housing or to help the community, in essence, very much aligned with what Councillor Orrell said. So that I don't think there is any deviation or view that we would want to do anything different than actually what it is that we've stated before, and actually what previous reports on NHS land and the utilisation of NHS land should be. I'm thinking of the Carter Review, for instance.
Thanks, Jonathan. And then generally comments on key worker housing. I think we talked about our aspiration for making better investments. If I look at Christchurch as an example, we developed housing on the Christchurch site that has a mix of nursing home and retirement village type housing that's affordable, but also we own a 50% share in those assets, so that the NHS owns, rather than having sold the land off, it donated the land but got the land, all the assets built in return, and owns a 50% share in the revenue that comes in from that. So I think what we're trying to do is make good decisions, and it won't all be key worker housing, Councillor Orrell, as you can understand, but I think what we will try and do, and we are planning to do within the Dorset system, is make good and wise decisions around our investment, so that if we do have to do it, anything that is not key worker housing, that it creates a revenue model or the right opportunity for us to have an income stream that allows us to continue to invest in services, which is what we want our NHS to be able to do, as we would all understand. I don't know if there's any other comments from the team, Nick or Jonathan, to add. No, shake their head. So Councillor, back to you or back to the chair.
Okay. My second one, Chair, if I may. The second one was on zero carbon. The comments you made were more about the construction and the operation of the building. I see zero carbon as more global and also in terms of patient journeys. So as Councillor Andrews said about bus routes, so we need to make sure that you measure the patient journeys as well and try and reduce them. There's a way forward shown that by COVID, far more teleconferencing and doing consultations online. So have you considered the entire patient journey?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Jonathan to come in a second, because we've got a digital stream that we're looking at, and obviously that's been enhanced massively by COVID. But Jonathan, do you want to just come in and talk about the work that we're doing to try and move more into the care close to home or make it more accessible?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, thanks, Steve. So, Councillor, to give you some reassurance, we're engaging some professionals in the field of data science to look at how we can locate our sites if a change is required to best serve the residents of that area. So that there are two ways that we do that. We look at, for example, journey times, but we also look at the current service as it's mapped out in its existence at the moment. And we marry those two pieces of information together, the existing service and the data science. And it's in its early stages at the moment. And we try then to utilize all of that data to come up with models that predict and show the existing healthcare demand, and then project that forward over 5 and 10 years. At the same time, we're also looking at how we can utilize new digital technology to, for example, incorporate things like virtual consulting rooms, because that would enable people to have access closer to home via various apps. So these are some of the sort of technologies that we're looking at the moment to try and improve overall healthcare. I hope that answered your question briefly, Councillor.
I think if I just carry on with that, Jonathan, around the broader, Councillor, about the broader net zero carbon. So Jonathan's answered part of that around our drive to reduce patient travel. Net zero carbon is still very early in its infancy in terms of development as an idea, and there's two different parts of that. There's whole life or operational carbon, and then there's construction carbon that they're referring to. And the NHS nationally and even don't yet know which bit to measure or how to measure it, because it's so early. So what we are looking at is trying to reduce in any of our constructions, trying to reduce our construction carbon to as low as possible, recycled concrete, recycled cement, etc., that we can, lower carbon products where possible. So a lot of that comes through recycled materials, but also trying to make our buildings as efficient as possible so that we use less carbon, and then actually we're then exploring ways to make net zero carbon operationally around solar PV or heat exchange units, ground source heat pumps, etc. going in. So we are looking at all of that range of options to bring them in. It's kind of hard to say what will be measured against in the long term, but that's, yeah, there's a broad suite of things at the moment. So we are doing everything from the digital right through to the construction end. Nick, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I think that's right. Ultimately, the definition of what net zero carbon is still to be defined, and we'll have a sort of a mark that we need to hit from that perspective. More broadly, we're also looking at all of those other things, as Steve says, and we're also looking at actually how, when we're delivering services, what is the carbon footprint. So the very obvious example at Dorset County is actually what's the environmental impact of our anaesthetic gases. How do we manage that? What else are we doing in terms of the materials we use through the clinical pathways that we've got? What carbon impact do they have, or what environmental impact that they have as well? So that's all being picked up, not very simply part of the program. We're doing it on a much wider scale. So if that was kind of some of the things that you're alluding to, we are also thinking about those things.
Good, thank you very much.
Okay. Good, thank you. I've just got a quick question from myself, and then I'm going to go on to Councillor Penfold, but I am quite conscious of time, and we do need to move on this committee. Just a quick question from me is that you've talked an awful lot about key worker housing for your own staff, but we also need key worker housing for social care staff as well. that is just as big a demand. And I wonder, would you take that away as something to look at, that when you're looking at key worker housing, don't just look at your own staff, because there's no point just that. I know we don't have a good definition of what a key worker is at the moment, but the bottom line is we need all sorts of key workers. So if that can be of use for your sites and we can put housing for them on there, that would be absolutely great. I don't expect you to answer that, so please don't. Could I go on to Councillor Penfold, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, the additional funding that you mentioned for Forston, is that specifically for the acute unit, i.e. wards or reception or what?
Jonathan, do you want to come in and answer that one, please?
Yes. Hello, Councillor.
Hello.
As I alluded to earlier, at this stage, it's really too early to make bold statements about what's going in and what's going out for that particular site. We're at the strategic outline case. We're very positive that we're going to get some funding for the outline business case development. When that happens, we'll go into a lot more detail. We'll review all of the options and drive forward that preferred way forward. And we will, of course, heavily involve the community in that process. We'll set up stakeholder groups and working groups to ensure that that happens, that, you know, sort of people in the community are fully engaged in that process.
Yes, yes.
But we're not quite there just yet.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're going to have to move on now. I haven't got anybody else in the chat bar wishing to speak. So can I just take this opportunity to thank you very, very much for coming along. It's been a really interesting talk, and I hope you've enjoyed the debate. We've asked you to take a few things away with you to consider. And I think it would be useful if at some time in the future, at a time that is suitable, if you could come back and give us an update on what is happening. Health is always controversial. Changes to hospitals are always controversial. And we need to keep, as a scrutiny committee, we need to keep an eye on this. But thank you very much for coming today. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Do you mind if we drop off, Chair? Is that okay?
Yeah, please. Yeah, feel free to stay. But if you'd like to vanish, that is absolutely fine. Bye.
Thank you.
Item 7, integrated care system update through winter. Have I got Emma Wilson here, please? Is she?
I saw her come into the.
Aha! Hello, Emma. You're on mute at the moment.
Apologies.
Okay. Hello. Could I pass over to you to introduce this paper, please?
Yes. Hello, Chair. Hello, councillors. My name's Emma Wilson. I'm the head of urgent and emergency care, standing in for Sue Sutton today. So the paper that you received was regarding how, as a system, we managed the COVID response, but also the pressures within the hospital. So the Bronze Health and Care Tactical Group was initiated from October 2020, bringing together health and social care representatives across the system. This group managed operational day-to-day issues and risks, including COVID, and delivered at pace the actions that were required throughout our unprecedented year that we've had this year. If the Bronze Group could not have exhausted all the options and done all the actions they possibly can, then it was escalated to our Health and Care Silver Group. So it was that command and control structure moving forward. So it was Sue, or as Deputy Chair myself, that escalated those up to Health and Care Silver. Regular updates also went to Health and Care Silver regarding the progression, and the Incident Control Centre, which is within our winter room, gave regular system response and situation reports regarding that. Also, we did reflect national and was 8 to 8. 7 days a week to respond to anything that came through the winter room. And the winter room was quite a success because it was about a consistent approach to information coming in and ensuring that it went out in a consistent way. So everybody was informed immediately if there were any issues. That was just my brief element, Chair, of that. There were some successes regarding that. When I talk about the system, I'm obviously talking about Dorset, Bournemouth and Poole within this. So our achievements are that we found an additional 350 beds across the system in hospital, community and care home settings, with 100 extra hours of domiciliary care to support the surge that we had within that time. We had regular reviews of community hospital beds to facilitate COVID and non-COVID discharge pathways, and our system partners were extremely flexible with those beds. As you can imagine, sometimes we were inundated with COVID, so we had to flex the beds towards a COVID response, but other times it was non-COVID, which it is coming up now, more non-COVID, so it's a flex in those beds. We also had multi-agency discharge events facilitated by our regional colleagues. And we had the deployment of the Ministry of Defence personnel into NHS services to support the workforce, because obviously workforce weren't immune to COVID as well, so the sickness and other areas, so they came in and supported that. And also we had an oversight of patients that were transferred from the east of the county to the Nightingale Hospital in Exeter. So that was more Bournemouth and Poole area. And also we oversighted the intensive care units over the southwest as well. So we monitored all of that moving forward.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you for all the work that the CCG have done over the last year. I think it's been absolutely fantastic. I've got one person, I've got a couple of people in the chat bar already. Could I go to Councillor Legg, please?
Thank you, Jill. I hope you won't think my question too critical. I have to say I felt a bit lost reading through the paper because there were a whole load of acronyms. I mean, there was MADE, there's MACA, there's HDP, there's OPAL, there's the System Surge Escalation Plan, the Bronze Healthcare Tactical Group. There's quite a long list of things, and I think it would have been helpful actually if there'd been a little diagram showing the structure of how the kind of decision-making processes work. And in terms of data, I think the interesting thing are a couple of bullet points which appear in 2.3. Which was the one that you've referred to about the achieving an extra 350 beds across the system. I think it would have been useful to see how that was broken down and how that compared with the existing numbers of beds in hospitals and care homes that were available anyway. And the second bullet point, which is about the review of community hospital beds to facilitate COVID and non-COVID discharges. I think sometimes you can encapsulate the ideas you want to get across in either some little diagrams or some just raw data of numbers of things and graphs. And I think it would have been much more intelligible from my point of view, because I got a bit lost reading through this because it was too much about the structures and about various organizational issues and not enough about, how many patients were actually transferred to the Nightingale in Exeter, where did they come from and what the outcomes were.
Thank you, Councillor Legg. Totally acknowledge your elements. Sometimes we get completely immersed in acronyms within NHS, don't we? And so actually I will take that on board and make sure that we don't do that, or if we do, we put an explanation of what that acronym is. So thank you for that, and I will move that forward. And I also agree regarding the diagrams, because sometimes within your meetings, and I did notice that you have a lot of things that you cover within these meetings, that actually diagrams would be more beneficial for you to see at a glance. So I will take that forward and respond that back to the team. Regarding the 350 beds, it was, as you know already, COVID, obviously with the social distancing that required, reduced the beds within the hospital anyway. So it was about finding other venues or other areas that we could use, and so it was about the care homes. as you can imagine, it was a very difficult time because also care homes had their own issues with COVID, so they couldn't take it anymore. And I will have to say, our community organisation, Dorset Healthcare, were absolutely fantastic about flexing those beds to maintain, and the local authority workforce were great within that time. But I totally appreciate the diagrams and the acronyms, Councillor Legg, and I will take that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Legg. I think that was going to be one of my comments as well. Sorry, Councillor Rennie, could I go to you, please?
Can I ask a question? And I think you've partially covered this, but you talked in 2.3, it talks about, it should be noted, no patients were transferred from Dorset County Hospital to the Nightingale or ICUs. And you mentioned that probably what you were talking about were people from Bournemouth and Poole area. But in our minutes from the last meeting, we were told patients were moved from Poole, from Dorset County Hospital into the Nightingales and ICUs elsewhere in the southwest. So it, and again, I think it's this picture that we're not quite understanding. And as you've just said, diagrams would be helpful, but that clarity needs to be there for us because we are scrutiny. And so if we're thinking, well, why did they say that 2 months ago? Also, could I ask, I see at 2.6, you've got the funding's being extended to help people come out of hospital, but can you confirm as it's extended into the summer, if it's still going to be for that 6-week re-enablement period for people to be able to move into their own homes or into the care setting, wherever it needs to be, as it's being extended? And the final question I've got is how will the effect on staff be shown to us? Because like us as an authority, we've got lots of staff that's got lots of leave, all got to be taken, and those sort of issues. People have worked absolutely flat out. They've been amazing, but we want to be sure that they keep well. And how will the impact affect the patients returning into care be managed, or what sort of impact will we have as a result of that?
So, Councillor Rennie, I will do my best to answer all of your questions, but some of them I might have to defer on and then come back to you on some of them. Regarding the clarity about Exeter Nightingale, so last time, as you can imagine, within the CCG, we are looking at the system all the time. So in our head, we always talk about the system. So I think where my programme director, Sue Sutton, was coming from before was from a system perspective that, yes, people did go into the Nightingale. However, completely understand you are a Dorset council and therefore you are interested with just purely Dorset and if any patients, and the answer is no patients from the Dorset area went into Exeter Nightingale. So that if that could be amended within the minutes, that would be most appreciated as well. But yes, that is it. So we would probably looking at it more as a system over the whole thing than actually look at it pinpointing to Dorset. Regarding the re-ablement and the extension, I can't answer that. Sorry, Councillor Rennie. I will need to come back to that. What that money is doing, unless there is anybody else within the forum that can support that question. I think Charlotte.
Yeah, we might be able to pick it up on our next agenda item, and Sue might be able to answer that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I've got a couple of people who've put their hands up.
The staffing element.
Oh, and so
and I understand that might not be something you could answer, but maybe even at our next meeting, that would be good for us to know.
Yes, so we've had huge support from our workforce colleagues within the CCG, and that's why we had the MOD come in as well, the Ministry of Defence, to support that. The workforce have, as you can imagine, been inundated and are tired, you know, so it's obvious that they are tired. I can't speak for other organisations, but I know they have put not incentives, but they have rewarded their staff for all of their hard work throughout of that time as well. So I think it's about that health and well-being, Councillor Rennie, and that we just need to make sure within all of the organisations that we continue with the health and well-being of the staff, because obviously they are extremely important to move that forward.
Okay, I've got a couple of officers, I think, with their hands up. Were they wanting to come in on this specific item?
Yes, please, Councillor. Hi, it's Vanessa. I was going to suggest exactly as I think Councillor Rennie and Emma indicated, that when we have the update on personal health commissioning, we can cover the hospital discharge programme and the funding schemes. So shall we just make a suggestion? Should we do that then?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there was somebody else with a hand up. Okay, it's come down. I've just got one question because time is moving on. We've talked an awful lot about hospital discharge and people coming into hospital. Are you doing much work about preventing unnecessary admissions at all? And if so, could you just outline what you're doing around that, please?
Yes, sure, Chair. So as you are aware, we have a Home First programme, which do have a sub group regarding admission avoidance, and they are looking at all admission avoidance. However, from a UEC, an urgent and emergency care perspective, we're also looking at attendance avoidance into emergency departments, and therefore that's when we look at our 111 and where to get that person to the right place first time. So actually if somebody called, do they actually need an emergency department, or could they go somewhere else? So there is a lot of work that's happening regarding all of that currently. You look slightly confused, Chair. So I was thinking,
no, it's just my normal face. Sorry.
so I was just, so actually that is one of our biggest things, because actually with COVID as well, we don't want people waiting, because obviously that's the transmission element to that. So we do want to make sure that people don't wait in waiting rooms, and so we've got enough options for people, a suite of options, that they go to the place that needs for their treatment straight away.
Okay, thank you. I think that will also be probably picked up a little bit later on in the meeting as well. I've got, oh gosh, Laura. Did you want to come in on this one, Laura? Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Only briefly, Chair, I just wanted to mention that we're working very much in partnership within the Home First model, Dorset Council teams, with our colleagues in healthcare, to try to ensure that we have as many admission avoidances as possible, because that's obviously what we all want.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's the end of the speakers on this agenda item. Could I just ask, we were asked for a breakdown of the 350 beds. Would it be possible for you to do that for us?
I'll do it as much as I can, Chair. Yes.
Yeah,
no
within reason, and to put that into perspective with how many beds we're talking about. I think that was the only question that we wanted answered. Did you want anything else answered, Molly, or are you okay later?
Oh, I'm fine, because it will come up later. Vanessa can maybe pick it up.
Okay, so do we need to approve this paper? I can't remember what the recommendations were.
No, it's just consider and comment.
Consider and comment. So I think we've got enough. Just check in with my committee clerk that we're okay for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Vanessa Reid wanted to comment.
Yes, Vanessa's got her hand up.
Okay, Vanessa?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to make a suggestion. Along with the breakdown of the additional beds, it might be helpful if you had more of an explanation of why those beds were needed. So the exceptionality that was, that we were presented with, and why we needed to source those at at short notice, rapid turnaround. So I think it would help paint a better picture for you to understand why we did it, and not just where we sourced those additional beds.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I think that finishes that item. We're going to call a short comfort break for 5 minutes now. So if I could ask everybody to be back for 22:12. And then we've got another 3 items before we break for lunch. Thank you. We're live. Okay, thank you very much. Right, we're on to item 8, personal health commissioning. Could I have Vanessa Reid? Is she there at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here. Thank you.
If you could present for this, please.
I will. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. My name's Vanessa Reid. I'm the Director of Nursing and Quality at NHS Dorset CCG. I'm usually at this meeting because I am the relationship link from the CCG to the Dorset Scrutiny Committee. But today, obviously, there's a paper, the Personal Health Commissioning paper, which sits within my portfolio of work. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time introducing the topic and giving you a little bit of an overview of personal health commissioning. Apologies in advance if I tell you things that you know already, but I think some of it might be helpful just as a reminder of what it is included within personal health commissioning. And then I'm going to hand over to Charlotte, who's also on the call, Charlotte Pascoe, who's the Deputy Director, of Personal Health Commissioning. And Charlotte will take you through some of the impacts of COVID-19 on the service, where we are with the deferred assessments and overall performance in continuing healthcare, and areas that we need to focus on moving forward, and some of the areas of achievement over the last over a year. Okay, so first of all, the term personal health commissioning is something that was devised locally to cover all of the aspects of individual commissioning that the CCG is responsible for. So most of you well aware that the CCG obviously commissions with large health providers, so Dorset County Hospital, Dorset Healthcare Trust, but some of you may not be aware that there's this individual commissioning responsibility for individual packages of care. And I'm just going to go through those components that make that up, the personal health commissioning service. So the first element that you're probably well aware of is continuing healthcare. You've probably heard it referred to as CHC. So NHS continuing healthcare is a package of ongoing care that is arranged and funded solely by the NHS. And this is when an individual has been assessed as having a primary health need as set out in the national framework for CHC. This framework is for people aged over the age of 18, and it is to meet their health and associated social care needs that have arisen as a result of a disability, an accident or an illness. As I've said, eligibility for CHC is not determined by the setting in which the package of support can be offered or by the type of service delivery. It is based on the concept of a primary health need. This is when the individual's need is for healthcare, which is appropriate for the NHS to provide, rather than social care, which the local authority may provide under the Care Act. So as I've said, to determine whether the individual has a primary health need, there's an assessment process which is outlined in the national framework. And I would just sort of say that it is quite a complicated process. And the decision for eligibility means that in practice, as I said, the whole care package is funded by the NHS, as opposed to the costs being shared between NHS and social services. This means that none of the services for CHC patients are means tested. So just as a little bit of local data, the most recent February information is we have around 492 people that are eligible for continuing healthcare. Associated with CHC is also the fast track and the funded nursing care element. So fast track is for people who may be entering a terminal phase of an illness, and NHS funded nursing care, FNC, is provided to care homes to support the provision of nursing care by a registered nurse. And that's based on a weekly rate that in 2020-21 was £183.92p per person per week. So in all cases, individuals are checked for eligibility before they make a decision about NHS funded nursing care. Most recent data for funded nursing care is we have 939 people in February in receipt of that. total budget for funded nursing care and CHC is around 38 million last year, 7.3 for funded nursing care and 31 million for adults continuing healthcare. So just moving on to children and young people's continuing care. So it's a similar principle, but it is a different framework. So again, this is required when a child has needs arising from a disability, accident or illness, and that they can't be met by existing universal or specialist services alone. So where they can be met through universal services, there should be a joint case management approach. As I've mentioned, continuing care for children is different because childhood is a period of rapid change, both physical, intellectually and emotionally. Then there is a stronger need for different partners to work together, not least, social care, education and health. And care for children is predominantly provided in their own homes. Currently there are around 100 children currently eligible for continuing care, and the annual budget for that is around 2.3 million. These are based on last year's figures, by the way. Section 117 of the Mental Health Act. Any person who has been detained under sections 3, 37, 45, 47 or 48 of the Mental Health Act can become eligible for section 117 aftercare when they're discharged from hospital. This is section 117 places an enforceable duty on health, so the CCG and the local authority, to provide aftercare services. Neither the CCG nor the local authority can charge for the services engaged to meet those needs. And in February, we have approximately 550 people funded under Section 117 in Dorset. And I think the budget for that is around 5 million. We then have a named patient programme, and this exists to fund mental health placements for people who, for clinical or situational reasons, can't receive their treatment in Dorset from the provider trust. The data for this is we currently have 35 people that are supported through that scheme, and the final scheme is the acquired brain injuries. This is defined as people who have had any damage to the brain that occurs after birth. It's not related to a congenital or degenerative disease, so it can be things like strokes or traumatic injury. Generally, it's a slow stream rehabilitation. We usually have in the region between 8 and 12 individuals who we would normally expect to fund on a package of care for 6 to 8 months, but this can be shorter, can be longer. And obviously the important aspect is we continue to support that package of care whilst there's a potential for rehabilitation. And obviously at the end of that period, if applicable, we would undertake a continuing healthcare checklist. And currently there are 13 people in receipt of that funding stream. So I'm going to stop. That's my overview and just a reminder of all of the individual funding schemes that exist in personal health commissioning. And I'm going to hand over to Charlotte unless you want to ask. I noticed that there was a question. If you want to take the question, and Councillor Taylor, or if you would rather leave it until the end.
Can I just ask you, Councillor Miller, did you want to come in at this point, or do you want to wait till the end?
I'm happy to wait till the end.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm handing over to Charlotte now, who's going to go through some of the impacts of COVID-19 on the Personal Health Commissioning Service.
Good afternoon, Chair and councillors. Okay, so in terms of, if I start off then with the impact of COVID on the Personal Health Commissioning Service. So the assessments for adult continuing healthcare were paused. There was national guidance that required us to do that between March and September last year. This was linked to people requiring a swift discharge from hospital and assessments needing to be undertaken within the community, as well as looking for staff to be able to be redeployed across other areas during the emergency period. So specifically within personal health commissioning, we had staff who were redeployed to infection prevention control. So that was looking at care homes, their use of PPE, making sure that those care home settings were safe, and also the same for our personal health budget holders and their personal assistants, again ensuring that they had the right support in place for that sort of thing. We also had members of staff redeployed to the Central Coordination Centre, which was in relation to hospital discharges, so ensuring that we was finding the right immediate care for people out of hospital, and some of our staff redeployed to frontline services within intensive care units as well during that period. So then we moved on to the recommencement. So we brought our staff back, and again, in line with national requirements, we recommenced assessments at the beginning of September last year. We moved to an environment of virtual assessments by default in order to keep everybody safe and maintain that social distancing, but to enable us to undertake those assessments in that environment. And we also undertook the deferred assessments. There were 635 of those that were in relation to that emergency period. The new processes, we needed to implement new processes to ensure that we were supporting the national funding scheme, which I know we touched upon in the last session. So it's slightly complicated, but in terms of the hospital discharge policy, so the national policy, first of all, we had HDP 1, which was the Hospital Discharge Policy Scheme 1. And this was for anybody coming out of an acute hospital setting who had new or additional care requirements, and those care requirements would be met through national funding until an assessment took place to determine the long-term funding stream for that individual. So there was no time limit in effect for that, aside from all of those individuals had to be assessed and their long-term funding stream determined by the end of March this year. So that, in effect, we refer to as the deferred assessment programme. Then we had HDP 2, which is Hospital Discharge Policy 2, and this came in September when the assessments restarted, and this allowed 6 weeks. I noticed, I think it was Molly referred to it as 6 weeks national funding. That was when that came in. So that then started any discharges from September. There was 6 weeks national funding, and that was a maximum of 6 weeks to enable assessments to take place, and again only applicable to new or additional care needs. That finished at the end of March, but then there was a very, very late extension from the government. So now we're referring to it as HDP 3, but it's made up of 2 parts. So between the beginning of April and the end of June, the 6 weeks continues as it did during HDP 2. From June until the end of September, we moved to 4 weeks national funding. So that means that there is only 4 weeks maximum of 4 weeks funding available for new and additional needs to ensure that assessments are taken place during that time. Alongside that, we're working as part of the Home First programme, which you may be familiar with. We're working with partners across the system to try and ensure that we have a local model in place for when national funding finishes, and discussions are ongoing and design is ongoing around that Home First model. That's where we are with that. So hopefully that answers people's questions around the national funding. Okay, so we also ceased any assessments taking place within an acute setting. That was part of the COVID Act. It was you must not do them in an acute setting, and it's right, because actually we should be assessing people once they are optimised and we know what their long-term health conditions are. So actually that's a good positive thing that is continuing on. So if I reflect now upon the actual deferred assessments programme, so when I'm talking about it, it's the HDP1 people. So this is people who either were discharged from hospital between March and September, or they were somebody who already had an assessment in process prior to the emergency period being declared. So some people obviously would have already been in train. As I said, we had 635 of those. There was a huge issue in terms of gathering data across the system to identify all of those individual patients and where they were sitting within the system at any given point. Obviously, there were challenges in terms of gathering evidence to support those assessments with the system, particularly with the likes of care homes, under significant pressure. So trying to get that information was very difficult. We worked across local authorities and the CCG. We agreed to utilise CHS Healthcare and Attenti to undertake a significant amount of those deferred assessments for us. And we utilised a trusted assessment model. So this is where one individual, in effect, in the process gathers all of the evidence and shares that, as opposed to needing to get all of the experts together in one place at one time. So that commenced in December. The information contained within your pack says 43 outstanding. As of last week, we were 27 outstanding. So significant progress has been made by all partners across that during the period. So that's a real success story across Dorset, really. Okay, so moving on to benchmarking. So I've included in here a few of our national benchmarks to give people an idea, just the graphs and things. We're in what they call cluster 4. So cluster groups are determined nationally, and they represent a group of CCGs that have similar demographics to our own. So as it will change again, and it's likely to change next quarter, I think, because obviously we've got CCGs now merging together and moving into integrated care systems. So those cluster groups are likely to change. But the pausing of assessments and the subsequent deferred assessment programme has impacted on the performance of all CCGs for completion within 28 days, which is shown in those graphs. It is likely to improve through quarter 1 and quarter 2. And we're in the middle of this in terms of Dorset. We're about medium as we are for the spend per 50k of population. So moving on to the next slide on this.
We're not actually seeing. I'm not seeing the slides. I don't know if anybody else is, Jill.
It's in your pack. You've got all of the slide deck in there. Apologies, I haven't shared the actual slide share.
Ah, right. I just was not sure if everybody's, because not everybody will have printed copies of everything. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. Apologies. Are we okay to continue as we are?
Yeah, please do, unless anybody wants anything different. If they put it into the chat bar, please.
Okay. All righty. So in terms of the next area on benchmarking, so Dorset is below the medium in terms of the eligible conversion rates for quarter 2 and quarter 3. Our conversion rate included all of the COVID deferred assessments project, and we did have a lot of cases within that were discounted as not being required, or unfortunately people passed away during the period. So we think that's the discrepancy against that, but we will obviously keep a close eye on that moving forward. The fast track referral eligibility rate is slightly below the medium. There were some issues through hospital discharges to the community. We had inappropriate referrals being made initially, and work has been undertaken with system partners to address this. We've also put in an additional service to support hospital discharge for specialist end of life. That's Marie Curie, who are now providing that for us, and we're ensuring that service is fully utilised and that we're only now making the fast track referrals for the most appropriate patients. We hit the majority of statistics for the rest of it. We have an average number of individuals who are eligible per 50k of population, and exactly the same for funded nursing care. The very low fast track figures are in relation to that specialist end of life provision that I have just touched upon. So patients now who are at end of life and are being discharged, they're getting a swifter discharge with the right care in place at end of life, and they don't therefore need a fast track referral for that. So that's why we are below that, but that's actually quite a positive story, I think. So what we need to focus on together moving forward, there's obviously always more to do. And one of the things that Vanessa touched upon was joint funding. We have developed a joint funding protocol for children and young people, which is agreed in principle but not enacted yet. We've got further work to do as partners across that for all ages. Section 117, you'll be aware that we need to develop a new Section 117 agreement, and also we have a significant review programme being undertaken with all partners across the system to ensure that the most appropriate people are, first of all, going into Section 117, they're being discharged appropriately, and we have the right care in place for them whilst they are receiving that care. We also need to build on some of the learning from the deferred assessments programme. So the trusted assessment model isn't something that we've done as business as usual, but was really effective during that deferred assessment programme. So something potentially that we need to take forward with us, as well as some of the virtual working that we've been doing, which also has been very effective. We need to continue to digitise our processes and develop our staff to ensure that all of our referrals are appropriate and that our MDTs consistently reach agreed recommendations. We occasionally have periods where we're getting split recommendations from MDTs, which only goes back to them for further consideration. So we need to make sure that we're consistent in terms of reaching agreements during those MDT meetings. I'm conscious of my acronym, multidisciplinary team, for those who aren't aware of that. Work with new national funding models as they come out, and obviously continue to ensure timely assessments post-discharge. The Home First programme I've touched upon. We need to ensure that we have a locally sustainable model in place for when national funding ceases. And also I referred to fast trackers, that's our end of life element of continuing healthcare. And we need to try and incorporate that into a wider end of life model so that we've got an equitable service for absolutely everybody across Dorset, and that's a seamless service. It's not one where somebody feels that they've got to fill out a load of paperwork at any point. It should be continuous. So if we just reflect upon what we've achieved across the service then, so we went through a massive transformation at the end of last year. We've implemented a new structure with additional management posts and a continuous improvement team. We've developed and implemented the joint disputes protocol with our local authority partners, which really ensures that decisions are made swiftly for our patients and they know the outcomes of those as soon as possible, and that disputes are managed in a really timely manner. We've developed the joint funding policy that I've touched upon. We've scoped now the programme for Section 117. We've implemented virtual processes for assessments and reviews. We have a Digital Pioneers project on robotic automation, which for those who are interested in IT, it's great in terms of some of those mundane tasks that we do day to day, actually using automated intelligence to undertake those and reduce the kind of pressure on staffing. Digital for CHC referrals, so we're using IEG4 for CHC referrals, and looking to the decision support tool, which is part of the assessment process for continuing healthcare, looking to utilise IEG4 for that, with a go live proposed of the 1st of May. For that, we've, as I've said, redeployed staff across the system during the emergency period, commissioned the end of life service for hospital discharge, the deferred assessments programme, which was a real partnership approach to that, and utilisation of the trusted assessment models. So I think there's some really good examples of where we've worked as in partnership across the system to support people during this period. And that was it.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for your presentation. At the moment, I've just got one RTS and I've got a couple of questions myself. Could I bring Councillor Miller in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Charlotte and Vanessa, for the presentation. I've just got a couple of things that I wanted to raise. Now, coronavirus notwithstanding, we know that our CHC levels in Dorset are low. I was interested, you referred to them as average, but the graphs that you've included don't bear that out, as far as I can see, and I'm not great at graphs. But we know that we do have quite a low level of CHC, you know, compared to other local authorities. And I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit. The second thing was that there isn't anything in there, although I appreciate you've spoken about, you know, reorganisation, redeployment, the pressures of COVID, which we're, you know, all very aware of. But there isn't anything in there about the patient experience and how people actually sort of respond and react during this process and what their outcomes are. You know, I think, you know, I would say this as an elected representative, but there has to be a human element, that we have to understand what this means for the patient who is going through this. And so, you know, I think for me, the other thing that I wanted to mention was, you mentioned inappropriate referrals. I wondered if you could just expand on that, because surely, you know, for my money, if a referral is made, it's in the best interest of the patient, the person, to actually go through that process and say, well, look, how does this work? And what should we be looking at here? And I just wondered what the criteria for an inappropriate referral is and how you judge that. So there's the couple of things, and I also think it would be really helpful later in the year, Chair, through you, if perhaps we could look at how the Section 117 impact is playing out and how that's working out, because I appreciate that you know, you're talking about just kind of starting that that adjusted piece of work, if you like. So yeah, lower than average rates, quite significantly lower than average rates of CHC. What's the human impact? Can we look at Section 117, and what does an inappropriate referral mean? Thank you.
Would somebody like to answer? One of you like to pick that up, please?
Charlotte, do you want to pick those up? Because it does relate, Councillor Miller, it does relate to the benchmarking slides. That on the slides, so if you got them in front of you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to juggle my phone and a couple of screens at once. So yes, I've got the benchmarking data in front of me. I do appreciate we've just been through a very strange year, but I also appreciate that those rates were low anyway. So
they weren't. That we have we've always benchmarked along the median line, which is the dotted line. The quarters that you're looking at now are peculiar, and they have had an impact because of the deferred assessment. But we have historically always been around about the median line for conversion from to eligibility. So the conversion rate has always been similar to those that are in our cluster, you know, the clusters that Charlotte explained. I don't know if you wanted to add any more, Charlotte, on that point.
I think sometimes it can be misrepresented when things are compared nationally, because when people compare national figures, you're not always talking about a similar demographic. So so that's why this kind of cluster benchmarking is quite helpful in that effect, in that it is people with similar or areas with similar demographics to ourselves, and that's determined nationally. That's not us choosing those who we are compared against. You touched upon inappropriate referrals, and yes, and it may be my language, it's where we get a very, very high level of referrals through where individuals perhaps who are making those referrals haven't had sufficient training, and therefore that creates an environment whereby there are full assessments taking place for individuals, which takes time obviously from ourselves, but also from local authorities and from other experts across the system, where those people are very obviously not eligible for continuing healthcare. So I think there's something around, and I recognise what you're saying within patient experience, but there's also something about patient expectation, isn't there, in terms of making sure that we're being fair to patients who we are putting through that process, because it's quite a detailed and complex assessment process as well to put somebody through. In terms of patient experience and how that's reflected with some of the stuff that we've done over the last year, on the whole, the feedback has been fairly positive from patients in terms of the speed with which assessments have been undertaken, and the reaching of swift conclusions and getting that right care in place quickly. There is always more to do, and you're right, in terms of presentations moving forward, I will try and put a bit more in around some of the stuff that we're doing around that, because we are looking at it, trying to get a more cohesive structure in place whereby we are regularly getting patient and family feedback. We have it through a monthly monitoring at the moment, but absolutely in terms of the actual assessment process and that sort of thing, we need that continuous feedback. Does that answer all of your queries, Laura, or was there anything else?
Yes, it sort of does. I have a feeling that the CHC conversation is something that, you know, doesn't just happen at a Dorset level. It is something that happens at a national level, and is going to be something that happens on. My concern, if I can speak plainly, which I always do, without the kind of local authority waffle, I suppose, my concern is that I am frequently in correspondence with people who go through this process of sort of wrangling over who pays for their care. And, you know, the communication that I have from my teams is that we have quite a low rate of CHC in Dorset. I appreciate what you're saying about the clusters. That is helpful. I mean, you know, there's no point in comparing us to central Birmingham or something. But when you are in a position that I am in, and you are constantly sort of getting these referrals from people that are saying, actually, we're going through this incredibly painful process, you know, and actually it rarely seems to pan out in the patient's favour, if you like. And I appreciate what you're saying about inappropriate referrals. You know, we want the process to be as light touch as it can be, because these are people that are living with challenging conditions. But I think that it's right for me to challenge that and to keep that conversation going, because of the, you know, the feedback that I have from residents of Dorset is that actually this is something that is not going away, and is something that I feel quite strongly about. It's not appropriate to be wrangling over a patient's care, and I'm sure you guys would agree. And until we have that bottomed out, whether that's kind of a Dorset thing or the more wider conversation, the patient isn't going to have the best experience, whether it's from health or social care. So I think this is just a conversation that is going to carry on. And we could go around the houses on this all day. But thank you for your responses.
Could I just respond to that, please? Because I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Miller. It is a contentious process, and by design, because the outcome is that quite often people might have to pay for their own care if they're not deemed eligible. I mentioned at the beginning is the process is quite complicated. So the framework, the way the framework's laid out, the way that the decision support tools conducted, the information that's gathered, it's not straightforward. It's not a binary decision, and I'm not trying to defend it by saying that. I'm just saying that it is what it is in terms of the framework is complicated, and unfortunately we've just got to try to sort of weave our way through it, be as supportive as possible to individuals, haven't we?
Can I just interrupt here? I think what it would be useful is if we take this either to another meeting, a separate meeting, about the CHC conversion rates, basically. Either take it to the next meeting or take it into a working group. And I'd appreciate some sort of indication from the committee what they think that the best line of the best approach to that would be. Councillor Rennie? You're on mute, Councillor Rennie.
My questions were all around the similar things that Laura has just said.
So mine.
My comments and around that experience and the understanding of it. And as we keep saying, we are a new committee, new to this piece of work. And I think it would be really useful if we had a greater understanding, like we're being told about enduring care basically for people, but there are people who are just, as we go forward, there'll be lots of people whose surgeries and care have been delayed, so they are going to be in a place that may be worse than it might have been, so their long-term care could be greater. I'd like to know about the impact on that, and I think I'd like a bit more of an informal presentation to the committee about the various forms of care, albeit somebody who comes out after a stroke with small, low-level needs to high-level needs, somebody who's broken their leg. What happens when the carer of somebody ends up going into hospital? What happens with the person who they're caring for? And then I could have a better picture of the understanding of where we would then going to go about the disputes and around that protocol for dispute. So I think I'm asking for a bit more information, an informal briefing for members, then we can decide if we're going to go into a working group. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, it does. I've got a number of people coming in. Vanessa, did you want to come back on that one?
I did, thank you. I think there's an element, it's been mentioned a few times here about Home First. I think there's elements where Home First might answer some of Councillor Rennie's questions as well, in some of the more lower level needs of discharge from hospital. I think that, and then the CHC aspect is at the most complex end. So I think we're happy to fall in with whatever you think would be most helpful, and if there's a briefing that you want to do outside of this, then we can do that and explain the CHC processes in more detail. But just to say, it is a very small cohort of people with the most complex needs. And so we have to put that, I think it's really important that you put that into the sort of grander scheme of everybody that has care needs within the Dorset boundary.
I think you're absolutely right, but I also think that they're the small cohort that costs the council and the NHS a huge amount of money. So we have to get this right. Just getting one referral in basically can end up costing a council a fortune. I remember on a different council, an officer saying to me, if somebody with needs wants to move, don't ask them to come to Dorset, please. So because some of these care costs are astronomical.
And it's not just the financial cost, it's the cost, the whole wider cost on a lot of services and that emotional care. And I take Vanessa's point, it's all part, a small part, but all small parts make the whole. And if we're going to be a scrutiny committee, we need to know all the small parts that make the whole.
Okay, so if I can take this off for a moment, and then we'll set up something over time so that we can all have a better understanding of this, so we understand where we're going. I think with another comment that Councillor Miller made, which was one that I was going to pick up, was on the section 117 programme, that you mentioned that you've got a significant review going on that. And I'm just wondering whether Scrutiny needs to be involved with the development of that as it goes forward. Mental health is one of the big things that have, or poor mental health is one of the big things that has come out of this pandemic. And it's something that I'm quite keen that this committee keeps an eye on. So I don't know what your timescales are like that, or whether in fact that is your actual priority for this year. But I would like the mental health stuff picked up, and I'd be interested in knowing what your priority is for this year.
Should I answer? So
yes, please.
This work is taking place over the first quarter of this financial year. I'm just into the second, and it's joint work with both councils. So it is work that's in progress, and it's joint work, and I'm more than happy that we can bring back any updates on that to future scrutiny committee.
Okay, that would be really good as appropriate. I've got Councillor Parry, and then I'm going to move on.
Thank you, Chair, and just echoing the your reference there to mental health, in particular, of course, adolescent mental health and children's mental health and well-being are of grave concern. We have seen a number of reported instances of this escalating in place as a result of lockdown and the rehabilitation and resettling of people as they come out of lockdown back into settled school environments. So I would certainly welcome any discussion around mental health to include children and young people, please.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to move on to the next item.
Oh, Kimber just come in, and you did have Robin with an RTS.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Okay, we are running really short on time now. So, Councillor Legg, if your question is really quick, please.
No, I'm going to, if we're going to have a informal discussion about this and then perhaps a working party, that would be, I think, a much better opportunity to follow this forward. So I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Kimber, as long as it's really, really quick.
Yeah, it is really, really quick. If you want any volunteers for the working party, happy. But later on, I think it's about a month's time, there is a week set aside for mental health. We could, if you like, quite easily go on there and for it to be promoted, Jill.
Okay.
That's as quick as I can be.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, on to our next item, which we should have been on to by 5 to 12, but we are running late, and I'm very conscious.
Thank you to Vanessa and Emma.
Sorry, could I say thank you to Vanessa and Emma? That was really, really useful, and I do appreciate your time. Yeah. You're very welcome to stay on for the next part of the meeting, but if you have other things to do, that's all well and good. Okay, thank you. Could we just go on to, where are we, the minor injuries unit report? I don't have anybody presenting on this one. We were sent the report. We had a message this morning that the lady who was going to present, which I'm sorry, I do forget her name, is unable to come. So could I go straight to questions on this paper, please? It's one that we've had, I think it's about the third time this has come back to us.
Robin Legg.
Councillor Legg, could you come in, please?
Thank you. I don't know whether John is also still online, because I dare say John will want to say something about this as well, because it's an issue which he's been
and he is
which he's been sort of following through. I think it's a bit disappointing not to have a clear indication, although there's a kind of ambiguous answer in one of the paragraphs here, which sort of says, well, when we come to the end of the lockdown, then the minor injuries units that have been closed will be reopened. And maybe that's the clue, but then it would be nice to have a very clear statement as to when those units are to reopen, and what, if it can't be given as a specific date, what exactly is the trigger without any ambiguity. Just before Christmas, I had the opportunity, I suppose you could put it that way, of taking my disabled stepson to the minor injuries unit in Shaftesbury, and it all worked very well. And I was able to ring up Shaftesbury and get an appointment, and we just drove over there. It wasn't, I have to say, going over on about the middle of December on a rather nasty evening for a 6 o'clock appointment wasn't a really easy journey. It was a very difficult journey. And once we'd been there for about half an hour, they sent us back to A&E in Yeovil. And it would have been much handier, really, to be able to drop into the unit in Sherborne. But I'd like to think that we can keep the opportunity, really, to ring units and make your appointments directly with them, rather than by some other process through 111.
Okay, we can feed that all back. Councillor Andrews?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very disappointed after months and months of trying to get the Chief Executive to answer questions on when and if or how the MIUs would open, not only in my town, but in Blandford and Portland as well. Why on earth a public servant decides that he's not going to answer anything, either to the MP, to the local council, or to you as Dorset Council, or us as Dorset Council. I think it's absolutely disgusting, and I think he needs to be held accountable for it, because we haven't had a proper answer all the way through. And once again, Robin has just pointed out this ambiguous answer that we've had now after the lockdown is over. I can't understand why. We've lost staff in Sherborne now that used to work in the MIU 13 months ago, 14 months ago, have gone and left because they didn't want to go and help out in Shaftesbury, because that's 25 miles and an hour's drive away. It's just, you know, some really experienced staff have left us. It's really, really disappointing. And I don't know what the cost is going to be of trying to employ those kind of staff who not only were great at their job, but knew the people as well of Sherborne. And it's all about localism and what we need to do. And I just think it's absolutely disgusting that a public servant like the Chief Executive has not answered questions and letters. I sent 2 letters as Mayor of Sherborne to him, never had a reply. It's absolutely disgraceful, and I think he needs to be held accountable. I don't know where we take this or what we do to it, but it can't go on like this. It's totally irresponsible of a person of that authority not to be able to actually answer a plain letter by the whole of Sherborne County Council. I signed it on behalf of the Town Council because we're all absolutely horrified that our MRU is still closed after 13 months. That's all I'd like to say on the situation, but I don't know what we do from here.
I think it's a very difficult situation. I could write to them and see if I get a response. What do we do if we don't get a response? I've had a conversation this morning with officers and they're prepared to take it up, but quite honestly, it's not acceptable. This is the 3rd time this has been on the agenda, and I expect somebody to come and speak to an agenda item when we have an agenda, when we have an item on our agenda. I don't expect us, as the chair, to sit here and just to say, here's the paper, has anybody got any questions?
No, it's very,
I don't think this is good enough.
No,
You've
no,
got
absolutely.
You've got Councillor Ireland, Jill.
Councillor Ireland, would you like to come in?
Yeah. Can you see me?
Yep.
Yeah, you can, sorry. A bit slow there. So obviously you're aware I'm a governor of Dorset Healthcare. So I can talk to the chairman of the chair of the governors, and we'll go that way as well.
If you could write to him as well, because this really isn't acceptable.
Will do.
Sorry, Chair. I think this is a matter for even the leader and the Chief Executive to take up as well at Dorset Council. And I think they need to write to the Secretary of State for Health to tell him what's going on, because I think it's absolutely disgusting. I couldn't treat my parishioners or sorry, my people in my town like this. If they ask me a question, I try every time to give them an answer.
Yeah.
We don't expect this from a person in this high a position within the health service to ignore basically everybody that's trying to ask him questions.
Okay, so I think I've got people coming in. Sorry, I've got people coming into the chat bar saying the the same sort of thing. So I will write to the whoever it is, and I'm sorry, I don't even know the name of the person, but I will sort that out and write a letter, and I'll copy the committee in so that you're aware of what we are doing. I shall also copy you in as well, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much. I think it's Eugene Yafaleli. I might not have got that pronunciation of his surname right, but that's a person you need to contact, because that's him.
Okay, thank you very much. If I can move on to the next item now, that is the Annual Children's Services Self-Evaluation Framework. And we're running a little bit late at the moment, but we need to get this one in certainly before lunch. So if I can hand over to Teresa to introduce this one, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you. So absolutely, really delighted to be able to present the annual SEF, the Self-Evaluation Framework for Children's Services, this afternoon. And Claire's going to talk us through her summary report. And the team are here to take any questions, because it does cover the entirety of the Children's Services Framework. So I make every apology for the size of the SEF and none, because it is a really complex framework that we deliver in children's services, and it's really important that we evaluate every part of that. And there's a very clear process that we go through with Ofsted, which has now concluded with a confirmatory letter that they support our SEF and are pleased to see it and buy it, and Claire will take you through those things. We, as you know, operate in children's services, a complete sense of transparency. We appreciate that the best way to deliver strong children's services is to deliver that in a whole council, a whole partnership way, and so the only way we can do that is to share together totally our strengths and our areas where we're still working on. So I'll hand over to Claire, if I might, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Claire Shields. I'm the Corporate Director for Commissioning, Quality Assurance and Partnerships in Children's Services. So, as Teresa said, this is a huge review of where we are and the work that we've taken forward in the last year, and also an assessment of our strengths and areas for development, which sets the plan for us for next year of where we want to go and what we want to achieve. It is part of our Ofsted inspection framework, so a really important piece of work that lets people know where we are, and also looks across a wide range of things. So it looks at how well our leadership and governance is doing, the quality and impact of our social work practice, our approach to performance management and quality assurance, and making sure that that's sound and robust. This time we've included our approach to COVID, because I think it's an important part of our story for this year, that despite COVID, we've managed to progress well with our plans and had really good and strong multi-agency engagement in that as well. And then our future plans to strengthen services. So you will see from the report, our strengths is that we are really working hard and working well together as a partnership to build solid foundations for children and young people. Our strengthening services plan is comprehensive and has good engagement across the system. And our children and young people's plan also sets an ambitious direction for our children and young people, which is well supported not only by the whole council, but by our partners across the system as well. So we're pleased that we have strong leadership, great corporate support to be able to deliver what we need, and good investment in children's services, which is really, really welcome. Our integrated front door arrangements are working well. We've added in there a multi-agency safeguarding hub and an early help hub to make sure that we're getting to the right decisions for our children and young people as quickly as possible, so we get them to the right level of service as quickly as possible, and that's really important. Good decision making at the front door and strong arrangements in place to get that right. We are working really well in embedding our new Dorset Children Thrive model, so our multi-agency teams, locality and place-based is working well, and serving our children and families well. We are pleased that CQC and Ofsted have come back and had a look at our collective responses to special educational needs and disabilities across the system, and have agreed that we're making good progress with that and have signed off our written statement of action. So good work that we've done together, and we've really improved our planning for children in care. Children in care coming to us in a planned way, which means that we're better able to meet their needs. We've got good, stable workforce, have done quite a lot of work this year on making sure that we've got permanent appointments. Our social work teams are strong, and with that means we are able to deliver manageable caseloads, and that gives us the good foundations we need to give our families a strong relationship-based practice, and we know that that is what they need and what we need to be able to get our work right and do it well. So that's our areas of strength and things that we've delivered this year. Our areas for development, we absolutely need to focus on improving the health of our children in care. Our SDQ completion, which is a way we understand the emotional well-being and mental health needs of our children, was low, a big area for priority for us. Pleased to say that that is very much improving already. So with some good focus and attention, we're getting there, and our corporate parenting board has given great oversight to improving the health outcomes of our children in care, and we've got partnership engagement in that. Work for us this year on ensuring that we have enough local foster carers and that those foster carers are able to meet the needs of our children and young people. Particularly focused this year on thinking about foster homes for teenagers, for short breaks for our children with disabilities, and making sure that we can get some robust fostering arrangements in place. We're making sure that we don't have more children than need to be on child protection plans. So really important that we're working with our families at the least level of intervention that we possibly can. So we're just checking out, we're making sure that when we're working with children, we're working with them at the right level. And we don't want to have too many children on our child protection plans. And we've already started to see some progress on that, which is good. Inclusion in schools, a big priority for us, and working really hard to make sure that children can be in mainstream schools as much as possible and receive really good inclusive education, because we know that works for them and that's the right thing to do. So working hard on that, and Mark's got a good grip on that. And we have got an inclusion conference coming up in July, which is helping just drive some of that work forward. That's also really important for us around our spend on high needs block, to make sure that we are appropriately using that money and making sure children are in the right place. So good progress from us on things we needed to work from last year. So we've delivered all of those things. So we needed to work on our timeliness of the initial child protection conferences. We've absolutely got that sorted and embedded, and that's working well. We needed to work hard on ensuring that we have good permanence plans. So that's about making sure our children in care know where they're going, know where they are, and that's got the right plans in place for them. We've made a good progress with that, and registration of children's homes, which again, we've made really good progress on as well. So we continue with our plans, focus for this year, improving the quality and availability of homes for our children. So big investment in sufficiency for our children in care and special educational needs and disability. Thinking about how we respond to the pandemic and making sure we meet those needs properly, and then continuing to deliver our multi-agency plans. Our quality assurance framework is strong, it's serving us well, it's helping us to know what's going on. We've got regular auditing in place, which is helping us identify areas for improvement. And I think we know that we're working really hard to deliver something good and something special in Dorset. So we're really pleased to be able to recommend this report to you. Gives you a good overview where we are and where our areas for development are. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your report. It was really good, really well written, and it was actually quite a real pleasure to read. I haven't got any RTS in the chat bar at the moment, but I have got a few questions myself. Before I start on my questions, I don't know whether you'd like to add anything, Councillor Parry?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for accepting taking the time to look at the report today. What has been an extraordinary year for everybody, but of course in children's services, can't be ignored, and the report does make that clear. But I also wanted to take time to highlight the fact that a lot of things that we talked about in theory 2 or 3 years ago are now implemented in our practice today. You know, we spoke about our ambition about reducing caseloads for our social workers. That has happened. The reason for that was it was so important for us to be able to do really good quality early intervention work and really support our families. And it's quite clear now that the green shoots of that are really starting to show, and we should be really proud of that, and the direction of travel we're going there. Similarly, we wanted to, we absolutely knew that we needed a stable platform for our employment, and we want to be an employer of choice. And again, the figures show, you know, there is a substantial reduction in the turnover of our staff, and everybody across the organisation should be congratulated and playing their part to make that happen. We talk about things like the Thrive model. It's wonderful to see it happening, and we've always spoken about our ambition for our children and young people. But I felt a little bit frustrated sometimes that some of our key partners didn't quite share the pace of our ambition. Well, they are now. They're sitting inside those forums with us, and that we are having those joint discussions, and we will get there. So there's, as you said, there's lots of good news in the report. We accept there's work to do, and we know where those areas are. And I touched on it earlier when I said, when we talk about things like mental health, please let's include children and young people in that discussion. It's imperative. So I won't take up too much of your time today because I know you do have a packed agenda, but I am very happy to take any questions from members, obviously.
Okay, thank you. I've got 3 questions, actually. The first question is around funding that for some of these services. I'm very much aware that an awful lot of funding comes as short-term funding from the government. And I picked up on the Dorset Families Matter one, that we've just had that extended to 2022. I'm just wondering how much of a problem is that? Because basically you're picking people up, you're getting them within a service, and then the funding vanishes. How much is a problem, and have we got any longer term plans to put this sort of thing into core funding? I don't know. Do you want to answer that one first?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'll come to others to detail some of that. We do have, as you've said, a range of grants that support our funding within children's services. We also trade a number of services, particularly in education, that have been significantly hit by COVID, as you'd imagine, in this last year, while schools haven't been purchasing some of those services. So those are causing some present pressures in our budgets, which we have some plans for. We work quite hard to make sure that those grants aren't funding services that if that grant ceased immediately, that service would cease for families. So we work to have them more as spot purchasing arrangements to support care packages where others are also involved, because otherwise that would be risky for our families. But of course it is a challenge, and the uncertainty of a single year financial strategy creates all sorts of challenges, doesn't it, as we understand. We are sensing that there will be a further campaign of bidding for money from central government. So we're positioning ourselves to be ready and available to that. But of course, that does also create some demand within us to be able to respond to that. But I don't know if any of my other colleagues want to add any further to that.
Claire, you would like to come in?
Yeah, the Troubled Families Programme has been renamed as the Supporting Families Programme, and there's quite a lot of conversation nationally around what the future of that looks like beyond 22-23. As Teresa said, we are really mindful at the moment. There's a lot of one-year grants coming through. For children's services, it's been interesting in that they don't really want to invest in administrative support for the administration of some of those grants as well. So that provides an additional challenge to us. We are looking quite hard on horizon scanning around what we think the bids coming through are going to be, and helpfully they support the delivery of our children and young people's plans. So we know there's a piece of work around the development of family hubs, which we know will really support how we deliver our services. So we are keeping in close contact with people in the know around some of those things, and keeping our eyes open about when they come around so that we can respond quite quickly. And we're pulling together a little bit of a packet of information that we know that is the usual stuff that they ask for in bids, so that we're well placed to be able to respond quite quickly. So we work hard to manage sort of not having a cliff edge for some of those programmes that are coming through, and advocating nationally around some of those as well. But we do know that this is going to be a year of bids, and we need to be able to respond swiftly to some of those that are coming through.
Mark.
And Chair, if I might follow on, just to say that the school sector is finding exactly the same issue. Pots of money coming sporadically and requiring very, very quick turnarounds. But our ambition to create a more inclusive school sector is absolutely at the heart of that long-term sustainability for us. The more we work in partnership with our education provision, the more we're able to rely on them stepping into that space to retain children at the lowest point of need, that will be a really helpful plan. So it's all embedded within our children and young people and families plan, but also within the strengthening services theme. So everything we're doing is a strategic step, so the more and more we can be a single system rather than a fragmented system, and I think that draws in people. And you referenced earlier, and Therese referenced, and Andrew referenced the health colleagues and others around the table. Ever more work to do there to bring us closer and closer together to that sector, to make sure that anything we do is a partnership response, as it is with our education provision, as it is with other parts of our business. We'll talk about youth justice later on. We have to make sure that our health colleagues are as close to the front line as we can possibly keep them, and to leverage some of those funds which do come through that system rather than coming through core council funds. So a real partnership piece.
Okay, that's brilliant. I've got another question around performance management, because you talk on page 60, I think it is, about performance managers, performance data being given to managers and staff. And I'm just wondering about performance data for members. There's obviously such a lot going on in here, and there's quite a lot of things that we would, as a committee, like to keep an eye on. And just wondering how that gets fed through to us, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we have an SLT performance scorecard, which goes through to leadership performance that's chaired by Councillor Wharf, and that's absolutely available for sharing with any of the committees. It does, as you'd appreciate, only highlight some of the particular standout performance indicators. In addition to that, within Children's, we have been incredibly well served by Bridget and her team, who have pulled together some fabulous dashboards. And by dashboards, I mean that you've got the numbers, but you also drill through to the individual children. So the drill through nature of the dashboards is what makes them really powerful for staff. But of course, it makes them slightly difficult to share in terms of the data protection. But what we can absolutely produce, and we do for the Corporate Parenting Board, or we do for the Safeguarding Panel, are a range of data sets about our key children. So we know at the touch of a button how many of our children are missing out on education, how many of our children in care are living in a permanent arrangement, how many of our children on child protection plans have been seen last week. One of the gifts of COVID for children's services was the need to report weekly to the Department of Education across a range of performance indicators. Now, whilst that took some work for colleagues to get through, it actually means we have more rich quality data than we've ever had before. So if you would like us to think about what that best set is for this scrutiny panel, very happy to do that, because we have lots, but we're also used to pulling together the very best data sets for the very best panels that we have.
I think that would be really useful. I'm sort of looking at your areas for development and how they're being monitored, not only by our staff and our officers, but also how we can just keep an eye on that. Could I go over to Molly, please? She's got a question in the chat bar.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just, well, you'd started part of what I wanted to say was funding. And I think really I'm more focusing on just the DA part of this. But I wanted to just say it was a real pleasure to read this whole report. And how you feel that the children and the young people and the staff who work with them are in a good place. It was a bit of a smiley report, if that makes some sense. Wrap your arms around everybody. But it's been really interesting for me recently, because I've had 3 of the prospective police and crime commissioner candidates ring me to talk to me about domestic abuse. And it made me realise how much is delivered outside the commissioned services. Because I was also thinking that as well in the terms of this afternoon's report as well, is how do we capture all of those children and young people who are within a non-commissioned service? Sometimes they, for instance, when I read Date's feedback, I see that family partnership zone or a social worker has referred in, but some of them have been self-referrals. And again, for STARS, you mentioned them in here, all these other people. How are we capturing them if they've not been picked up in a herder or a family visit or something like that, because that journey for the ones that we've missed, that could be the worst journey, not part of this lovely, nice feeling that's there.
Could I go over to Sarah Jane to answer that one?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Under our community safety partnership, we're doing exactly what you're talking about. So we're really thinking hard about which provisions are out there, working alongside our children and their families where domestic abuse is a concern, and making sure that those families, if they haven't for any reason come to the attention of our statutory services in children's services, or indeed early help, that we know that we're aware of where they are. And particularly thinking about Operation Encompass that you'll be familiar with, so really police-led. What it's done is it's given a great opportunity for our schools to really think hard about who their children are, and to also think into their communities as to where are the supports for their children, if it isn't children's social care, because it doesn't always need to be us. But it's going to take some really good conversations also in our local alliance groups for people to know and understand where those provisions are. So another piece of work which you'll be familiar with, Councillor Rennie, that our judiciary are supporting is thinking about family hubs, and our judges are really leading on that work alongside ourselves and BCP. So again, that mapping and really understanding where our families are, their place, the supports that are available to them, and particularly for domestic abuse, because we know that it's so far reaching for our children. So hopefully that helps to answer some of the provision question.
Thank you. I'm just going to say, like I sat there in the first meeting that Judge Dancy had, and the one that you and both Teresa was in, I was thinking, thank goodness, at last, you know. But yeah, and we should never keep going backwards. But I think I can get boring about this, because I do worry about these lost people who nobody knows where they are. And again, that's why I'm really pleased that the herder is doing so well now. I know I expressed concern at the last meeting, or the meeting before, about health were feeling a wee bit unable to be there all the time. And I feel a bit more comfortable about that now. But I just hope that as we move forward into this year, that we all still have the time to do all this. I worry what's going to come down the line at us, not just with DA, but everything else, all the hidden underneath issues for people. It's a bit like earlier on with the health, all those people that have not come forward and said, do you know, I've had this pain for a year. Do you realise I'm now hooked on paracetamol? You know, and that sort of thing. I think we could, there's a lot of work that we're going to have oversight on for the next months and months and months. But I just really also wanted to just say again, well done, because I just think it's a fabulous paper. And I'd be really pleased to see the domestic abuse toolkit when it comes out in April, May time.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Molly. And you know, it is all credit to the team. We are really blessed with fabulous staff, and the reason they're feeling okay is because actually there's a motivation that they've really sparked about. It has been, and I don't say this glibly, it has been quite a privilege to be in children's services in a COVID pandemic, because it does give you purpose and focus. And I think that our staff really have strongly reported that back to us as well, which is really welcome. But we are nervous, as you are, about what might the future hold. And the reason I hold lightly and tightly to this concept of hope is it is actually quite essential for our children. So we have to remain hopeful. And I was, if you forgive me, I was talking to my own 8-year-old granddaughter the other day, and she was telling me how much she'd learnt in COVID. And she wasn't talking about schoolwork, and she was talking about herself and how much more resilient she felt than, she didn't use that word, obviously, than she had done previously. And so we've also got to be able to listen to the fact that children have learned a lot this time. They've learned a huge amount this year. They've learned what we never learned as children at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They've learned about dealing with things that are unknown. They've learned about managing life and complexity. I'm less worried, if I'm honest, about the children. I'm probably more worried a little about the young people and some families, parents who have really struggled and have really felt the pressure. And so I think we know where we need to put our focus and attention, and our staff are geared up and ready to do that into schools, into that early help space, really listening quickly and responding. We are seeing some families coming forward that wouldn't have come forward if they hadn't had a dreadful year. I'm confident that is what we're seeing, but we'll manage them out into being supported by what, again, you know, we've seen a fabulous community, haven't we, in Dorset in the last year? So we know they're there to support, and we'll be tapping into all of that, hopefully.
Okay, thank you very much, Teresa. And I'd like to echo Molly's comment. I thought it was an absolutely fabulous paper. It makes you smile, that one does. So I haven't got any more RTS in the chat bar. Could I just check, are there any other councillors with any other questions? Right, nobody's coming in, so I'm going to close the morning session. I do apologise for being a little bit late. We're running about half an hour late, but I will see everybody back, please, by 1:30. And please remember that you need to come back on a different link. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.